Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The abandoned corporate park stretched before us like a graveyard of ambition, half-demolished buildings jutting from the earth like broken teeth. My shift partner and I had taken this shortcut through the development countless times before. It shaved 15 minutes off our route back to the distribution center. But tonight felt different. The October air hung thick and still, unusual for Phoenix even at this hour, and the newly paved roads gleamed wet despite the absence of rain. We'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when I first noticed the white pickup. It crawled along the perimeter road, headlights sweeping across empty lots where office buildings had been reduced to rubble and rebar. The engine's rumble echoed off the remaining structures, a low growl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. My partner noticed it too. I caught him glancing over his shoulder, adjusting his grip on his work bag. The truck made a second pass 5 minutes later. This time I could make out two figures in the cab, though the tinted windows obscured their features. The passenger's silhouette shifted, head turning to track us as they rolled by. My skin prickled with that primitive awareness of being watched, the same feeling I'd get walking past coyotes in the desert at dawn. By the third pass, something had changed. The passenger seat was empty. The pickup idled 30 feet away, engine ticking and rumbling in the silence. No door had opened. I would have heard it. The driver remained motionless behind the wheel, a dark shape that might have been looking at us, or might have been looking at nothing at all. I pulled out my phone. No signal. Not unusual out here, but the timing made my mouth go dry. The reverse lights blazed white. The truck began backing toward us, slow and deliberate. Not the jerky, uncertain movement of someone trying to turn around, but the measured approach of something with purpose. My partner grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. That's when I saw it. The storm drain grate twisted open like a mouth in the asphalt. Without thinking, without discussing, we both moved toward it. The metal rungs were slick with something that wasn't water. The smell hit me as we descended. Industrial solvent mixed with something organic and wrong. The tunnel below was a concrete artery, maybe 6 feet in diameter, with a trickle of dark liquid running along its bottom. Emergency lighting fixtures dotted the ceiling at intervals, but none were operational. We used our phone flashlights, the beams creating wild shadows that danced and writhed with each step. Above us, the truck's engine grew louder. Then came the sound that made my blood freeze, tires rolling slowly overhead, matching our pace exactly. They knew where we were. They were following the storm drain's path, tracking us like hunters following wounded prey. The boot prints appeared in our flashlight beams about 50 yards in. Fresh impressions in the thin layer of sediment, the tread pattern crisp and distinct. They weren't ours. Wrong size, wrong pattern. They led deeper into the tunnel system, and worse, some of them faced back toward us, as if someone had walked backward, watching the tunnel behind them. My partner started breathing faster, harsh gasps that echoed in the confined space. I wanted to tell him to be quiet, but my own breathing was just as ragged. The solvent smell grew stronger, making my eyes water and my head swim. The walls seemed to pulse in the flashlight beams, expanding and contracting like we were inside something alive. A junction appeared ahead, 3 tunnels branching off in different directions. The boot prints led down the leftmost passage, but the tire sounds above were heading right. We went straight, moving faster now, splashing through the trickle that had become a stream. My work boots slipped on the slick concrete, and more than once I had to catch myself against the curved walls, my hands coming away covered in a film that felt like oil, but smelled like copper. The tunnel began to angle upward. Another grate appeared above, this one showing a rectangle of purple sky. We climbed, desperate to escape the pressing darkness and that persistent rumble of the engine that seemed to follow no matter which direction we turned. I pushed the grate aside and hauled myself up, reaching back to help my partner. We emerged 2 blocks from where we'd entered. The white pickup sat at the intersection ahead, engine off, headlights dark, waiting. I pulled my partner behind a low concrete barrier, some remnant of a demolished building's foundation. We pressed ourselves flat against the dusty ground, hearts hammering so loud I was certain they could hear us. The desert silence was complete. No insects, no distant traffic, nothing but our breathing and the tick of the cooling engine. Then I heard it. On the other side of the barrier, inches from where we lay, breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing that matched neither mine nor my partner's rhythm. The breath came in long draws, patient and measured, like someone savoring air after being underwater too long. With it came that smell again, solvent and copper and something else, something that made my hindbrain scream warnings. A whisper, so close I felt the words more than heard them. Come back. The voice was wrong. Not quite human, or perhaps too human. Like someone had learned to speak by listening to recordings played backward. It came from the darkness of a drainage canal that ran along the barrier's edge, a throat of shadow that seemed to extend forever. Come back. My partner's hand found mine in the dark, squeezing so hard I thought the bones might break. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. The thing on the other side of the barrier shifted, gravel crunching under weight that seemed too heavy, distributed wrong, like someone walking on hands and feet. You took the wrong tunnel. Come back. The white pickup's engine roared to life, headlights blazing. In that sudden illumination, I saw them. Shadows that didn't match anything casting them, moving independent of their sources. They flowed like liquid across the ground, reaching toward us with appendages that weren't quite arms, weren't quite anything recognizable. We ran. Behind us, the engine sounds multiplied. Not one truck, but many, their headlights creating a constellation of pursuit. The shadows lengthened and merged, forming corridors of darkness that herded us toward the drainage canal. My partner stumbled, went down hard. When I pulled him up, his face was pale, eyes focused on something behind me that made his mouth work soundlessly. I didn't look back. We reached the chain-link fence at the development's edge and went over it, tearing clothes and skin. The distribution center's lights blazed ahead, promising safety, normalcy, sanity. We sprinted across the empty lot, burst through the employee entrance, startling the security guard who looked up from his magazine with mild concern that shifted to alarm when he saw our faces. The guard asked what happened. I couldn't answer. My partner just shook his head, over and over, like he was trying to dislodge something from his mind. We clocked out early, didn't speak in the locker room, drove home in separate cars. I called in sick the next 3 days. When I finally returned, my partner had already quit. No notice, no explanation. The security guard mentioned he'd been asking about the old corporate park, about who owned it, who had worked there before the demolition started. The guard said my partner had seemed different, distracted, kept touching his neck like something was crawling on it. I'd take a different route now. 15 minutes longer, but I never have to see that place. Except sometimes, in the rearview mirror, I catch glimpses of a white pickup following at a distance. When I look directly, it's never there. Just shadows that don't quite match the objects casting them, and the persistent smell of industrial solvent that clings to my clothes no matter how many times I wash them. Last week, I found boot prints in my apartment, fresh ones, leading from the front door to my bedroom, that same distinctive tread pattern from the tunnel. They faced the bed, like someone had stood there watching. The property manager swears no one has a key but me. The security footage shows nothing, just shadows moving in ways shadows shouldn't move. I've started leaving the lights on at night, all of them. But in the moments between waking and sleep, I hear it again. That patient breathing, that whisper that comes from everywhere and nowhere. Come back. Sometimes I wonder if we ever really left those tunnels. If maybe we're still down there in the dark, and everything since has been our minds trying to make sense of something that can't be understood. The solvent smell grows stronger each day. My reflection in mirrors doesn't always match my movements perfectly. There's a delay, just a fraction of a second, like it's considering whether to follow along. My former partner called yesterday. At least the caller ID showed his number. The voice was his, but wasn't. Words formed in reverse order, meaning assembled from scattered syllables. He said he understood now. Said the tunnels went deeper than we knew, connected to places that weren't quite here, weren't quite anywhere. Said the white pickup was just the beginning, that they'd been waiting in that abandoned development for someone to take the wrong path, to open the wrong doors. He said they're patient. They've always been patient. Before the line went dead, he whispered those two words that have haunted every silent moment since. Come back. I know I should move away from Phoenix, start over somewhere else. But something tells me it wouldn't matter. Some doors once opened can't be closed. Some paths, once taken, lead to the same destination no matter which direction you run. The boot prints appear more frequently now. Sometimes wet, sometimes dry, always fresh, always watching. The shadows in my peripheral vision grow bolder, taking shapes that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The smell of copper and chemicals has become my constant companion. Tonight, I found a storm drain grate in my bathroom floor that wasn't there yesterday. The building manager insists it's always been there, shows me blueprints that my eyes refuse to focus on. Below, I can hear water trickling, though the sound seems to come from much deeper than the apartment below mine should be. I know what they want. The whispers have become clearer, more insistent. They want me to return to those tunnels, to take the left passage where the boot prints led, to see what waits in the depths beneath that abandoned corporate park. Part of me, a part that grows larger each day, wants to go, wants to understand, wants to know if this creeping madness is real or if reality itself has become mad. The white pickup is parked outside my building now. It's been there for 3 days, engine off but somehow still rumbling, a sound I feel in my bones rather than hear. The driver's seat is empty, has always been empty, will always be empty. But something watches from within that darkness, patient and eternal. Tomorrow, I think I'll take that shortcut again. Walk through the abandoned development one more time. Follow the boot prints down the left tunnel, see where they lead. Maybe I'll find my partner there, or what's left of him. Maybe I'll find answers. Maybe I'll find nothing but more questions, more tunnels, more shadows that breathe and whisper in the dark. Or maybe I'm already there. Maybe I never left. Maybe this is all just the dream of something sleeping in those tunnels. And when it wakes, I'll cease to exist entirely. The whispers promise understanding. The shadows promise truth. The boot prints promise a path to follow. All I have to do is come back. Story 2. The hydraulic fluid still clings to my uniform 2 weeks later. No amount of washing gets it out, that synthetic sweetness mixed with burnt metal. I tell myself it's just the fabric holding onto molecules, nothing more. But sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, the smell intensifies, and I hear that rhythmic beeping again, matching my heartbeat perfectly. I was 2 months into the job when we got the call. The steel mill on the north side, where the city bleeds into industrial wasteland. My partner that night was an old-timer who'd seen everything twice. He barely looked up from his crossword when dispatch crackled through about an operator down at Bethlehem Steelworks. The facility loomed against the night sky like some ancient cathedral dedicated to industry. Steam vented from a dozen points, creating ghosts that danced in the sodium lights. We pulled up to Gate 3, where the supervisor waited, a thin man whose hands shook as he led us inside. The accident had happened in Section 7, near the blast furnaces. The heat hit us first, a wall of it that made breathing feel like drowning in reverse. Then came the noise, the endless percussion of machinery that made human thought feel small and temporary. The supervisor shouted something about a catwalk, about 30 feet up, but his words got eaten by the industrial symphony. We found the operator sprawled on the lower platform, surrounded by metal shavings that glittered like broken glass. The smell down there was overwhelming. Hydraulic fluid? Yes, but something else too. Something organic and wrong that made my stomach clench. The man was conscious, barely, his eyes rolling back to show too much white. His hard hat had cracked clean through and there was blood, but not as much as you'd expect from a fall like that. My partner started checking vitals while I stabilized his neck. That's when the radio interference began. static at first, then cutting in and out with fragments of voice. Not dispatch, something else. A metallic voice, processed and hollow, repeating numbers. 17, locker 17, shift change at 1700. I looked at my partner, but he was focused on getting an IV started, apparently not hearing it. The supervisor had backed away, his face pale under the harsh industrial lighting. When I made eye contact with him, he turned and walked quickly toward the stairs. We got the operator onto the backboard, every movement careful and practiced despite the strange atmosphere pressing down on us. As we lifted him, his hand grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the machinery. I leaned closer. The words came out wet and distorted, like he was speaking through water. Still on shift. Can't leave. Still on shift. The ride to the hospital should have been routine, but the radio kept cutting out, replaced by that same metallic voice. Locker 17. Contents must be collected. Shift incomplete. My partner drove in silence, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road. When I asked if he heard the interference, he just turned the radio off entirely. At the ER, they took the operator straight to trauma. The supervisor from the mill was already there, had somehow beaten us despite leaving after we did. He pulled me aside while my partner handled the paperwork. "You need to get his things," he said, pressing a key into my hand. The metal was still warm. Locker 17, company policy. All personal effects collected within 4 hours of incident. I wanted to refuse, to ask why it couldn't wait until morning, but something in his eyes stopped me. Fear, maybe, or recognition, like he'd seen this before. The drive back to the mill felt longer. I went alone, told my partner I'd forgotten to grab something from the scene. The facility seemed different without the emergency lights, without the urgency. Just another night shift grinding away at steel and souls. Locker 17 was in the basement changing room. The fluorescent lights flickered in a pattern that almost seemed deliberate. The locker itself was unremarkable. Dented, painted that industrial green that exists nowhere in nature. Inside, a wallet, keys, a lunch that would never be eaten, and a pager, still vibrating against the metal shelf. The display showed alert after alert, all time-stamped from hours ago, before our call, before the accident. Catwalk 7. Inspection required. Pressure variance detected. Operator response needed. The messages kept scrolling, the same sequence repeating. The timestamp never changed. 2017, 2017, 2017. I pocketed the items and turned to leave, but the lights cut out completely. In the darkness, I heard footsteps on the floor above. Heavy, rhythmic, matching the phantom beeping that had started in my ears. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red, and I saw him. Or thought I did. A figure at the far end of the room, standing perfectly still. Coveralls like mine, like the operator's, but wrong somehow. Too tall, joints bent at angles that hurt to perceive. When I blinked, it was gone, but the footsteps continued above me, pacing. I ran. Not proud of it, but I ran. Up the stairs, through the corridors that all looked the same in the emergency lighting. The footsteps followed, always above, always matching that beeping rhythm that was either in my head or in the walls or both. The radio in the ambulance was on when I got back, despite my certainty that my partner had turned it off. That metallic voice again, clearer now. Shift change denied. Coverage required. Return to Station 17. I drove back to base in silence, delivered the personal effects to the supervisor who was somehow still there, still waiting. He took them without a word, but I saw him check the pager, saw his face tighten at whatever he read. That should have been the end of it. Just another industrial accident, another reminder that steel mills eat people as surely as they eat iron ore. But the radio interference followed me home. My scanner, which I keep on out of habit, started picking up transmissions that didn't match any frequency I knew. Always at 2017, always the same metallic voice. Sometimes it was coordinates, always leading back to the mill. Sometimes it was shift schedules for workers whose names I didn't recognize. Sometimes it was just counting. 17, 17, 17. I started driving by the mill on my off hours. Couldn't help it. Something pulled me there, like gravity, like magnetism, like the place had marked me somehow. During the day it looked normal, workers coming and going, trucks loading and unloading. But at night I'd see things. Figures on the catwalks who moved wrong, whose safety equipment glowed with a light that didn't match the sodium lamps. I'd see supervisors checking clipboards that were blank, nodding at nothing, marking time that had already passed. And always, always, someone walking on catwalk 7, right where the operator had fallen, walking with that same rhythm. Step, 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 beep, beep, beep. I went back to check on the operator a week later. The hospital had no record of him, no admission, no treatment, nothing. When I called the mill, they said there hadn't been an accident. No incident reports, no injury claims. The supervisor I'd spoken to, no one by that description worked there. But I had the key. Still have it. Locker 17's key, warm in my pocket like it's fresh from someone's hand. Sometimes I wake up at 2017 exactly, that beeping in my ears, that smell of hydraulic fluid so strong I have to check if I'm bleeding it. My partner quit last week. Didn't say why, just turned in his badge and walked. But I saw him once, driving past the mill at night, just sitting in his car, watching, like me, like all of us who've answered that call, who've walked those catwalks, who've heard that metallic voice cutting through the static. The radio still does it. Not every night, but enough. Enough to remind me that I'm still connected to that place somehow. That maybe I never really left. That maybe none of us do. Sometimes I think about going back to locker 17, using the key, seeing what's there now. But I know what I'll find. The same wallet, the same keys, the same pager still vibrating with alerts from 2017. Because time doesn't work right in places like that. Places where metal meets flesh, where shifts never end, where the machinery runs on something more than electricity and steam. Last night, I heard my own voice on the radio. Metallic, processed, but definitely mine. Calling in an accident at the mill. Operator down on catwalk 7, requesting immediate response. I wasn't on shift. I was home, in bed, listening to myself report an accident that hadn't happened yet, or had already happened, or was always happening, caught in some industrial loop that grinds on and on like the mills themselves. The smell is getting stronger. The hydraulic fluid, sweet and synthetic, seeping through my pores. The beeping is constant now, a rhythm I can't escape. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see myself wrong. Too tall, joints bent at angles that shouldn't exist. Wearing coveralls I don't own, standing on a catwalk I've never climbed. Maybe I'm losing it. Maybe the stress of the job, the long hours, the constant exposure to trauma, maybe it's finally catching up. That's what the rational part of my brain says, the part that still believes in cause and effect, in linear time, in the difference between real and imagined. But the key in my pocket is real. The smell that won't wash out is real. The voice on the radio calling me back, always calling me back, is real enough. Tonight I'm on shift again. It's 20th now. In 17 minutes, the radio will crackle, the call will come through. An operator down at Bethlehem Steel Works, Section 7, near the blast furnaces. And I'll respond, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done, what I'm always doing. The ambulance is already running. I can hear it idling outside even though I haven't started it yet. My partner is already in the passenger seat, even though he quit last week. The route to the mill is already mapped in my mind. Every turn, every gate, every step from the entrance to catwalk 7. The hydraulic fluid drips from my uniform now, leaving trails that disappear before they hit the ground. The beeping has synchronized with my pulse, or maybe my pulse has synchronized with it. Either way, we're in harmony now, the mill and I, part of the same system, the same endless shift that started before the accident and continues after it. folding in on itself like metal being pressed and shaped and pressed again. 2016 now. 1 minute. The key is burning in my pocket. Locker 17 is calling. The supervisor who doesn't exist is waiting with paperwork that was never filed. The operator who was never admitted is still falling, always falling, 30 feet through superheated air onto a bed of metal shavings that glitter like broken glass, like stars, like the lights of a city that builds itself from the bones of the men who feed it. 2017. The radio crackles. I answer. Story 3. The listing said, recently remodeled basement apartment, like it was something to celebrate. $400 below market rate should have been my first warning. But desperation has a way of making you overlook the obvious. Milwaukee in February isn't kind to the unemployed, and when you're 3 months behind on everything, you don't ask questions about why a place that nice sits empty for 6 months. I moved in during a snowstorm, boxes getting soaked as I hauled them down the narrow exterior stairs. The basement was surprisingly spacious. Exposed brick walls painted white, new laminate flooring that tried too hard to look like hardwood, track lighting that cast everything in that sterile showroom glow. The previous tenant had left a vintage record rack in the corner, solid oak with brass corners. The landlord said I could keep it or toss it. I kept it. The first 3 nights passed without incident. I unpacked slowly, arranged my books on the built-in shelves, set up my desk against the wall that got the most light from the small windows near the ceiling. During the day, with sunlight filtering through those windows, the place felt almost cozy. At night, the track lighting made shadows that didn't quite behave the way shadows should. Too long in some places, absent in others where logic said they belonged. It was the 4th night when I first woke to find the hallway light on, not unusual in itself. Old wiring, I told myself. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw it there, standing beside the record rack, perfectly still. At first, I thought someone had broken in, and adrenaline shot through my veins like ice water. But as I blinked, trying to focus, I realized this wasn't quite a person. The figure had the shape of a man, average height, wearing what might have been a suit or might have been shadows. But where the face should have been, there was only a smooth, blurred surface, like looking at someone through frosted glass. Not featureless exactly. There were suggestions of features, impressions where eyes and mouth should be, but nothing resolved into clarity no matter how hard I stared. I must have fallen back asleep, because the next thing I knew, morning light was streaming through the windows, and the hallway light was off. A dream, obviously. Stress from the move, unfamiliar surroundings. The mind plays tricks. But then I smelled the coffee. Rich, dark roast. That particular burnt sugar note my grandmother's percolator used to make. The scent was so strong it pulled me from bed. I found a full pot in my kitchen, still warm, condensation beating on the glass. I lived alone. I hadn't made coffee. I didn't even own coffee grounds yet. It was on my list for the grocery run I'd planned for that afternoon. I poured it down the sink, watching the dark liquid spiral away, trying to rationalize. Maybe I'd made it in my sleep. Sleepwalking wasn't unprecedented for me, though it had been years. Maybe muscle memory from my old apartment. Maybe. The upstairs tenant caught me on the stairs that evening as I was taking out trash. He was a thin man, probably mid-40s, with the kind of nervous energy that made you tired just watching him. His eyes kept darting past me, down toward my door. He asked if I'd settled in okay. I said yes. He asked if I'd noticed anything unusual. I hesitated, and that hesitation was enough. His shoulders sagged with what looked like relief. He told me about his experiences then, speaking in that rapid, hushed tone people use when they're afraid of being overheard or disbelieved. He'd seen the same figure I had, the blurred face, the suggestion of features that never quite resolved. But in his apartment, it appeared in the kitchen, pressing its non-face against the glass door of his microwave, moving its head slowly back and forth like it was trying to see its own reflection, or trying to see through the distortion to what lay beneath. Since that conversation, I've noticed it too. Every time I use the microwave, the door fogs from the inside, a perfect circle of condensation about the size of a face. It happens even when I'm just reheating coffee. Nothing that should produce that much steam. The fog appears gradually, starting at the edges and working inward, and in those few seconds before it fully forms, I swear I can see the outline of features trying to push through. I started keeping a journal, documenting each occurrence. The figure by the record rack appeared every third or fourth night, always in the same spot, always perfectly still. The coffee happened twice more. Same brand I'd never bought, same grandmother's percolator taste. Once I found a cup already poured, sitting on my kitchen counter, still steaming. Research into the building's history turned up nothing unusual. Built in 1924, converted to apartments in the 70s, no reported deaths, no tragic histories. The basement had been a storage area, then a laundry room, then converted to an apartment just last year. The remodel had been extensive, knew everything, right down to the studs. But something was wrong with the measurements. I noticed it when I was arranging furniture. The basement should have been smaller. Based on the foundation visible from outside, there should have been another 100 square feet somewhere. I measured obsessively, checked against the upstairs tenant's floor plan, when he invited me up for beer. His apartment was definitely larger than mine, even accounting for the basement's thicker walls. I found it eventually, a section of wall behind the water heater that sounded different when knocked. Hollow. But there was no seam, no door, just smooth drywall painted the same white as everything else. The landlord claimed ignorance when I called. Previous architectural quirk, he said. Old buildings were full of them. The presence grew bolder. I'd wake to find it had moved, sometimes by the kitchen doorway, sometimes at the foot of my bed. Always that same blurred face, like someone had taken an eraser to reality itself. It never made sound, never moved while I watched, but evidence of its activities accumulated. Dishes rearranged in the cabinets, books shelved spine in, all my vinyl records. I'd started collecting them to fill that abandoned rack, turned to face the wall. The upstairs tenant stopped me again, 3 weeks after our first conversation. He looked haggard, dark circles like bruises under his eyes. The thing had been pressing against his bathroom mirror now, he said, leaving those same foggy circles. But worse, he'd started seeing it in peripheral vision during the day, quick movements in reflective surfaces, a blur sliding past windows, a shape in the black screen of his television. I'd been experiencing the same, but hadn't wanted to admit it. Every reflective surface had become suspect. I'd removed the mirror from my bathroom, turned my computer monitor to face the wall when not in use, even went so far as to put tape over my phone's black screen. But it didn't help. The presence found other surfaces, the window at night, the glass door of the oven, even the surface of my coffee when the light hit it just right. The coffee continued appearing, sometimes a full pot, sometimes just a cup. Always that same distinctive taste that pulled me back to my grandmother's kitchen, to being 8 years old and safe. I started drinking it. I know how that sounds, but after the 5th time, the 6th, the 10th, it seemed more dangerous to refuse, like rejecting a gift from something that had gone to considerable effort to learn your preferences. Sleep became elusive. Not from fear exactly. The presence had never been overtly threatening, but from a kind of hyper-wakefulness, a constant awareness of being observed. I'd lie in bed tracking its movements by the subtle changes in air pressure, the way shadows shifted without any light source changing. Sometimes I'd feel the mattress depress slightly, as if someone had sat on the edge of the bed. But when I looked, there was only that familiar blur standing in the corner, face turned toward the wall. I started finding notes. My handwriting, but nothing I remembered writing. Simple things at first. Check the record rack. The coffee is getting cold. Look in the mirror. Then longer messages, more urgent. It wants to be seen. The glass is thinning. Stop hiding from your own face. The upstairs tenant moved out abruptly. No goodbye, just gone one day. His apartment immediately listed for rent. I thought about leaving too, but something held me back. Maybe it was the cheap rent, Maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the growing certainty that whatever this was, it wasn't confined to the apartment. It was in me now, or I was in it. The boundaries had gotten unclear. I've started seeing my own face differently. In the brief moments before the microwave door fogs, before I can look away, I catch glimpses of my reflection that don't quite match what I expect. Features slightly off, like someone had traced my face from memory and gotten the proportions wrong. The blur beside the record rack has grown clearer over time, not sharper, but more familiar. The suggestion of features has begun to resolve into something almost recognizable. Last night, I made a decision. Instead of fleeing when the presence appeared, I walked toward it, stood directly in front of it, close enough that I could smell that coffee scent that clung to it like cologne. The blurred face tilted toward mine, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not the features themselves, but what they were trying to become. It was my face, or trying to be. Like something had been studying me through frosted glass, through foggy mirrors and microwave doors, trying to understand the arrangement of eyes and nose and mouth, trying to comprehend what it meant to have a face at all. The recognition hit me with a physical force that sent me stumbling backward. Now I understand why the measurements were wrong, why there was hollow space behind the walls. The apartment isn't smaller than it should be. It's doubled, folded in on itself like paper, two spaces occupying the same location, separated by the thinnest membrane of reality. And I'm not alone here. I never was. I've started making coffee for it now. 2 cups every morning, one for me, and one that I leave by the record rack. Sometimes the cup empties while I'm not looking. Sometimes I find it later in unusual places. Inside the microwave, behind the books. Once perfectly balanced on the edge of the bathroom sink I'd been avoiding. The fog on the glass surfaces has changed too. Instead of obscuring, it's starting to reveal. Each time the microwave door fogs, the features become clearer. Not my features anymore. Or not just mine. Something hybrid. Something between what I am and what it's trying to become. We're meeting somewhere in the middle, in that blurred space between recognition and anonymity. I've stopped keeping the journal. There's no point documenting something that's documenting itself, writing its own story in coffee rings and foggy glass, in rearranged objects and the slow dissolution of boundaries between observer and observed. The presence doesn't stand by the record rack anymore. We stand there together, or perhaps we're the same thing standing there, looking at our reflection in the window, trying to remember which side of the glass we started on. The new upstairs tenant has started asking questions. She mentions strange sounds from below, the smell of coffee at odd hours, the way her mirrors fog when she's not in the bathroom. I tell her it's an old building. I tell her these things happen. I watch her nervous glances toward my door and recognize the expression, the same one the previous tenant had, the same one I must have had those first few weeks. Yesterday, she asked me directly if I'd noticed anything unusual. I hesitated, just like I had before, but instead of confirming her fears, I found myself saying no. Nothing unusual at all. The words came out smooth and automatic, like something else was speaking through me. Or maybe it was me. And the thing that used to be separate was now so integrated that its denials had become my own. I don't know when I stopped being afraid. Maybe it was gradual, like the slow focusing of those blurred features. Maybe it was sudden, like the moment you realize the monster under your bed is just the shadow of your own dangling foot. Or maybe fear just transformed into something else. Recognition, acceptance, a kind of terrible intimacy with something that knows you better than you know yourself, because it's been studying you from the other side of every reflection. The coffee pot is full again this morning. I pour 2 cups and walk to the record rack, where my reflection waits in the morning light through the window. We stand there together, sipping coffee that tastes like memory, like my grandmother's kitchen, like safety that never quite existed. In the glass, our face is finally coming into focus. Story 4. The Texas sun had been dead for 3 hours when I found the station. No sign marked its existence, just a concrete box squatting beside Highway 90, like something the desert had coughed up and forgotten. The fluorescent lights inside flickered with that particular frequency that makes your teeth ache, casting everything in a sickly yellow pallor that turned my skin the color of old newspaper. I'd been driving for 6 hours straight, my water bottle empty since Sanderson, and my throat felt like I'd been gargling sand. The bell above the door rang when I pushed inside, but it kept ringing. Not the cheerful ding-ding of arrival, but a continuous metallic tremor, as if the clapper had gotten stuck mid-swing. The sound burrowed into my skull while I stood there, waiting for someone to appear behind the counter. The register sat open, bills fanned out like playing cards. A coffee pot gurgled on a hot plate, the liquid inside thick and black as motor oil, probably cooking there since morning. Maybe longer. The ringing stopped. I walked to the coolers at the back, my boots echoing against linoleum that might have been white once but had yellowed like teeth. The refrigerator hummed with mechanical distress, and through the glass doors, I could see condensation running in rivulets that looked almost deliberate, like someone drawing patterns from the inside. The water bottles were warm to the touch despite the freezing air blowing from the vents. I grabbed 2 anyway. That's when he entered. The door didn't ring this time. He just appeared in my peripheral vision, a shape in a faded denim jacket moving toward the energy drinks. But he wasn't looking at them. In the curved reflection of the glass door, I could see his eyes tracking me, following my hand as I reached for a 3rd bottle. When I shifted left, his reflection shifted too, maintaining that perfect angle where he could watch without seeming to watch. I moved to the counter. He drifted behind me, always keeping 2 aisles between us, his footsteps somehow out of sync with his movement. I could hear him walking when he stood still, silence when he moved. My neck prickled with that primitive awareness that comes from millions of years of being prey. The register was still open, still no one behind the counter. I left a 20 beside the coffee pot and headed for the door. He followed. Outside, the parking lot felt smaller than when I'd arrived, as if the desert had crept closer while I was inside. My car sat alone under a streetlight that hadn't been on before, the bulb now glowing with that same sick yellow as the store's fluorescence. Moths circled it in perfect formation, their shadows creating patterns on my windshield that looked almost like letters. I unlocked the door. The click echoed too many times. 2 shapes materialized from behind the ice machine, just silhouettes at first, but gaining substance as they moved into the light. They walked with that same unsynchronized gait as the man from inside, their feet making sounds that didn't match their steps. One wore what might have been a postal uniform, faded to the color of dust. The other had no distinguishing features at all, just clothes that seemed to shift and blur when I tried to focus on them. My hand found the door handle, but the man from inside was already approaching, that practiced smile stretching across his face like someone had drawn it there with a ruler. His teeth caught the light wrong, casting shadows in the wrong direction. He asked if I had change. The words came out normal enough, but there was something underneath them, a second voice speaking just out of sync, creating this barely perceptible echo. I shook my head and got in the car, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. In the rearview mirror, a blue sedan materialized, not arriving, not pulling up, just suddenly there, as if it had always been there, and I'd only now noticed. No headlights, but I could see the interior perfectly, lit by a dashboard glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. The driver's silhouette didn't move, didn't shift, didn't even seem to breathe. I turned the key and floored it. The tires screamed against the asphalt, laying rubber in black strokes across the concrete. In the mirror, the 3 figures stood perfectly still, watching. The sedan didn't follow immediately. It waited until I was almost to the highway, then eased forward without any sound of an engine, gliding like something on rails. 20 miles out, my hands finally stopped shaking enough to notice the speedometer. 95 and climbing. The sedan maintained perfect distance behind me, always the same 3 car lengths back no matter how fast I went. Its shadow fell wrong on the road, stretching forward instead of back, reaching toward my bumper with fingers of darkness. That's when I saw the receipt. It fluttered against the windshield wiper, pressed flat by the wind but somehow not flying away. The paper looked old, yellowed like the store's linoleum, but the printing was sharp and new. My name at the top, though I'd never given it. The timestamp showed my arrival down to the second, an inventory of items I hadn't purchased. 3 bottles of water, correct. 1 map of local roads, I hadn't seen any maps. 1 reservation, what? 1 return journey, predetermined. At the bottom, in red ink that looked wet despite the wind, return. I pulled over at the next exit, hands trembling as I grabbed the receipt. The paper felt wrong, too thick and slightly warm, with a texture like skin. The blue sedan had vanished, but I could feel it somewhere behind me, waiting in that space between the mirror's blind spots. The receipt's details shifted when I looked directly at them, words rearranging themselves like insects scattering from light. The timestamp now showed tomorrow's date, then next week, then dates that hadn't happened yet, wouldn't happen for years. Each time I blinked, the store's address changed. Highway 90, Highway 285, Highway 54, roads I'd never heard of, roads that might not exist. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas at stations with people, real people who made eye contact and counted change, and whose footsteps matched their movement. But at each stop, I'd find something. A business card tucked under my wiper, a flyer wedged in my door handle, a napkin stuffed in my gas cap. All with the same message: return. By dawn, I'd covered 400 miles, zigzagging across West Texas in patterns that made no sense, trying to lose something that wasn't following me in any way I could understand. The morning sun revealed new messages, in the dust on my hood, in the condensation on my windows, in the arrangement of dead insects on my grill. Return. 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 I stopped at a diner in Fort Stockton, desperate for normalcy, for witnesses, for the mundane chaos of human interaction. The waitress poured coffee that steamed with the same sick yellow as those fluorescent lights. The other patrons moved with that familiar unsynchronized gait, their conversations occurring at frequencies that made my teeth ache. When I looked at the menu, every item was water, bottles of water, warm water, water that remembered being something else. The receipt in my pocket had grown heavier. I could feel it pulling, not down but back, toward the west, toward that unmarked station squatting in the desert. The pull grew stronger with each mile I put between us, like a rubber band stretching past its breaking point. I've been driving for 3 days now, or maybe it's been 3 hours. Time moves differently since the station, stuttering forward and back like a broken film reel. The blue sedan appears in mirrors that shouldn't exist, in windows, in puddles, in the reflection of my own eyes when I check the rear view. Sometimes I see myself driving it, looking back at myself with that practiced smile. The receipt has grown into receipts, plural. They multiply in my pockets, in my glove compartment, between the pages of my owner's manual. Each one shows different items, different times, different versions of events that haven't happened or already have. One shows a purchase date of 1987, another 2047. All of them end the same way: return. I know what waits at that station, not death. That would be too simple, too final. Something else. A transaction that was started but never completed. A reservation made in my name before I was born. A return journey to somewhere that exists in the spaces between the highway lines, in the gap between the bell's ring and its echo. The sun sets again, or still, or for the first time. The desert stretches infinite in all directions, but every road leads back to that concrete box, that yellow light, that coffee burning eternal on its hot plate. The steering wheel turns itself now, gentle corrections that feel like suggestions, like invitations, like commands written in a language older than words. In the mirror, the blue sedan is gone. Or I'm driving it, or it's driving me. The distinction matters less with each passing mile, each recurring receipt, each return to the beginning that hasn't happened yet but already has. The station appears on the horizon, exactly where it wasn't before, exactly where it's always been. The lights flicker in that familiar frequency, spelling out messages in Morse code that my teeth understand better than my brain. The bell is already ringing, has been ringing. will ring forever in that space between sound and silence. I pull into the parking lot, or I never left, or I'm still choosing water from coolers that hum with mechanical distress, watched by reflections that move when their owners stand still. The receipt in my hand says, returned. The one in my pocket says returning. The one that hasn't been written yet says return. I understand now. The transaction was never about water or change or anything that could be bought or sold. It was about the return itself, the journey back to a place that exists only in the returning, a loop that closes by never closing, a receipt for a purchase that hasn't been made yet but was completed before time learned to move forward. The door opens, or I open it, or it's been open all along, waiting for me to walk through and find myself already inside, choosing water from coolers that remember being something else, in a station that exists in the space between the highway and the desert, between the real and the reflected, between the leaving and the return. The bell rings, stops, continues. I'm driving away, tires screaming against asphalt. I'm walking inside, boots echoing against yellowed linoleum. I'm standing at the counter, leaving a 20 that's been there since before the coffee started burning. The receipt flutters against my windshield, new and old, written and unwritten, saying what it's always said, what it will always say, return. Story 5. The fluorescent lights in the Chicago Blue Line station flickered with that particular rhythm that makes you question whether it's intentional or decay. 3:17 a.m. The platform stretched empty except for me, and the distant rumble of something that might have been a train, or might have been the city's circulation system digesting another night. I'd stayed too late at the office again, debugging code that seemed to rewrite itself every time I looked away. My eyes burned with the specific exhaustion that comes from staring at screens in dark rooms, and my reflection in the train window looked like someone I'd forgotten knowing. They got on at division. 3 of them, wearing those polyester scarves that soccer fans wrap around themselves like armor. The smell hit first. Stale beer mixed with something sharper, like copper pennies left in vinegar. They swayed with the train's movement, but also against it, creating their own rhythm that made my inner ear ache. I hadn't spoken, hadn't even looked up from my phone. But one of them, the tall one with the face that seemed to shift features when I wasn't looking directly at it, started speaking in an exaggerated accent. My accent. The Portuguese inflection I'd spent years softening, the specific way I still pronounced certain consonants when tired. "Please to be excusing," he said to his friends, and they erupted in laughter that sounded like breaking glass played backward. The thing was, I recognized the phrase. It was exactly what I'd said to a barista that morning, fumbling with my card at the register, word for word, inflection for inflection. I kept my eyes down, counting stops. 3 more until home. The train lurched, and the lights went out for exactly 2 seconds. When they came back, the men were closer. Not dramatically closer, just close enough that I knew they'd moved without seeing it happen. The middle one, whose face I couldn't quite hold in memory even while looking at it, started humming. It was a song my grandmother used to sing while cooking, something from the old country that I hadn't heard in 15 years. The notes were perfect, even the little trill she'd add at the end of each verse. Grand Station. 2 stops left. I stood, moving toward the door. They stood too, maintaining that careful distance that could be coincidence or threat. The tall one was speaking again, but this time it wasn't mimicry. It was prediction. He was saying the exact thoughts running through my head, voiced in my accent, but a half second before I thought them. Getting off at Chicago, walking fast, don't look back, just need to get home. I jumped off at State Lake instead. The platform was empty except for a janitor pushing a mop bucket that left no trail of water. The 3 men followed, their laughter now a physical presence that pressed against my eardrums like depth pressure. The station's architecture felt wrong. Too many corners, passages that shouldn't exist according to the map I'd memorized over 5 years of commutes. I headed for what should have been the exit, but the corridor stretched longer than physics should allow. Behind me, their footsteps multiplied, as if there were 6 of them now, or 9, or... I turned into a service alley between buildings, the kind of shortcut you're not supposed to know about, but every late-night commuter does. The sound of my footsteps came back wrong. Not quite an echo, more like someone else walking in shoes identical to mine, matching my gait but offset by half a beat. The alley should have opened onto Franklin, but instead it kept going, the walls breathing slightly in my peripheral vision. My phone vibrated. The screen showed an incoming call from my own number, time-stamped 2 minutes ago. Not 2 minutes from now, 2 minutes ago. As if the call had already happened and was just now catching up to its own existence. I didn't answer. The voicemail notification appeared instantly. The laughter had stopped, but the silence was worse, thick and expectant, like the pause before thunder. I could feel them behind me, not following but already there, waiting in the spaces between seconds. A building with a lit lobby appeared on my right, one of those 24-hour doorman places that promise security in exchange for rent that eats half your salary. I banged on the glass, probably looking exactly like what I was. A panicked man being pursued by something he couldn't adequately explain. No doorman. The lobby was lit but empty, the kind of empty that feels intentional. Then I heard it. My name. Not shouted or whispered, just stated matter of fact in my own voice. Not from behind me, but from where I was standing, as if I'd said it myself without moving my mouth. The voice had the exact rasp I get when I've been talking too much, the slight whistle on the S sounds from when I broke my front tooth in college. My phone buzzed again, a text this time from my number. "Stop running from yourself." The doorman appeared so suddenly I almost screamed. He was looking at me through the glass with the expression of someone who'd been watching the whole time. His face was familiar in a way that made my stomach cold. Not someone I knew, but someone I might become. He moved with deliberate slowness, each motion seemingly requiring tremendous effort, as if he were pushing through thick liquid. The lock clicked, 7 times. Buildings like this had 1 lock, maybe 2. 7 clicks, each one deeper than the last, like tumblers falling in a mechanism much larger than a door. I pushed inside, and the warmth hit me like a physical wall. But it was wrong. Warm, the kind that comes from too many bodies in too small a space. The lobby was still empty. Behind me, the laughter started again. Not outside, inside. In the lobby I just entered, coming from the corners where the shadows pooled too thick for the overhead lights to penetrate. The men hadn't followed me in. They were already here, had always been here, were waiting in the negative spaces between the furniture. The doorman was gone. Or maybe he'd never been there. The desk where he should have been sitting was covered in dust that looked like it had been accumulating for years, except for 3 handprints. Fresh ones, with too many fingers. I ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. My footsteps echoed wrong again. Not behind me, but ahead, as if I were chasing myself up the stairwell. On the 3rd landing, I passed someone going down. They had my jacket, my laptop bag, my exhausted stride. We didn't make eye contact. The 4th floor hallway stretched in both directions, lined with doors that all looked identical except for the numbers, which weren't in any order that made sense. 4B, 9X, 2, Thursday, Mom's room, the one you don't open. My apartment should have been on the 7th floor of a different building 8 blocks away. But my key was already in my hand, and it fit perfectly into the lock of door 4B. The metal was warm, almost feverish. Inside was my apartment. Exactly my apartment, down to the coffee mug I'd left on the counter that morning, still half full and growing a skin of milk. But the windows showed the wrong view, not the city but the inside of another apartment, where someone who looked like me but wasn't quite was staring back through their window at me. My phone rang. My landline, the one I disconnected 3 years ago. The caller ID showed a number I recognized, my childhood home, the one that had been demolished to build a parking structure in 2015. I answered. The voice on the other end was my grandmother's, but speaking in my voice, with my current inflection, my exhausted rasp. "You're home late," I said. "The others are already here." The living room I hadn't entered yet erupted in laughter. Not 3 voices, but dozens. All mine, all from different ages. 5-year-old me laughing at cartoons. Teenage me's nervous laugh before a first date. The bitter laugh from after the divorce. All layered, all simultaneous, all coming from throats I couldn't see but knew were there. I hung up. The laughter continued. The bathroom mirror showed my reflection, but he was already brushing his teeth, getting ready for bed. He looked well rested. He looked like he'd been home for hours. He smiled at me with too many teeth, all of them mine. I backed into the kitchen. The refrigerator was humming in harmony with itself. 3 different notes that shouldn't have been possible from a single appliance. Inside, every shelf was filled with identical takeout containers, all from the restaurant I'd ordered from tonight, all with receipts dated tomorrow. The front door opened. I walked in, looking exactly as exhausted as I felt, carrying my laptop bag, wearing my jacket. This me didn't acknowledge my presence, just walked past and collapsed on the couch, immediately asleep. Another door opened, one that hadn't existed in the wall before. Another me entered, this one in gym clothes I'd thrown away years ago. Then another, in the suit I was planning to buy next month. They kept coming, all ignoring each other, all going about their routines as if they were the only one there. The apartment filled with versions of myself, all slightly wrong. One had my face but moved with someone else's mannerisms. Another had perfect features but my exact way of cracking my knuckles when nervous. They multiplied until the space couldn't physically hold them all, but somehow it did, expanding inward like an Escher drawing. My phone buzzed. A message from myself. Check your voicemail. I played the message from earlier, the one from the impossible call. It was my voice, but speaking words I was thinking right now, in real time, as if my thoughts were being broadcast from the past. You're listening to this and wondering if you're having a breakdown. You're not. You're having a breakthrough. The barriers were thinner tonight. The alcohol helped, even though you didn't drink. Their laughter was the key, even though they weren't real. You're home now, even though you never left. Stop trying to understand which one you are. Start accepting that you're all of them. The mess in the apartment all stopped moving at once. All turned to look at me. All smiled with recognition that felt like drowning. I ran, back through the door, down stairs that went up, through hallways that folded into themselves. The building was breathing now, really breathing, and I could hear its heartbeat in the walls. Or maybe it was my heartbeat. Or maybe there was no difference anymore. The lobby was full of doormen now, all with that almost familiar face, all watching me with the patience of people who knew how this ended. The front door was open. The street beyond looked like Chicago but felt like nowhere. The skyline familiar but wrong, as if someone had described it from memory rather than seen it. I stepped outside. The 3 soccer fans were there on the corner, still laughing. But now I could see their faces clearly, and they were all mine. Me at different ages, different weights, different stages of exhaustion. They waved, a synchronized gesture that I felt my own arm wanting to complete. My phone rang one more time. The caller ID just said, "You." I answered. "Welcome home," I said to myself, and I could feel my mouth moving with the words even though I wasn't speaking. "We've been waiting for you to catch up." The city around me was full of my footsteps, past and future, all walking in different directions, all leading to the same place. Every reflection in every window was me, but also not, like photographs of twins where you can't tell which is which because they're both neither and both. I'm still walking, or maybe I'm already home, or maybe I never left the train, and the fluorescent lights are still flickering in that rhythm that makes you question whether it's intentional or decay. The laughter continues, somewhere, everywhere. It sounds exactly like me when I realize a joke I should have understood years ago. It sounds exactly like me when I understand I'm the punchline. It sounds exactly like... Story 6. The headlights in my rearview mirror weren't just following me. They were breathing down my neck like something alive and hungry. I'd been driving through rural Idaho for 3 hours, the kind of darkness that swallows everything beyond your high beams, when the black sedan appeared. One moment, the road behind me was empty. The next, those twin lights filled my mirror so close I couldn't see the grille, couldn't make out anything but the harsh glare that turned my car's interior into a stark theater of shadows. My speedometer read 65, then 70, then 75. The sedan matched every adjustment, maintaining that suffocating distance like we were connected by an invisible tether. The road ahead curved through potato fields and abandoned farmhouses, their broken windows catching my headlights like dead eyes opening and closing. I could taste copper in my mouth, that metallic tang of fear that comes when your body knows something your mind hasn't accepted yet. The roundabout appeared like a promise of escape, its 3 exits radiating into different directions of darkness. I'd passed through here before, years ago, remembered it as unremarkable, just a traffic circle where farm roads intersected. But tonight it seemed to pulse with possibility. I entered without signaling, tires humming against the worn asphalt. The sedan followed. I circled once, watching those headlights sweep behind me like a predator testing its prey. On the second rotation, something changed. The lights behind me died. Not gradually, but instantly, as if someone had thrown a switch. My rearview mirror went dark, but I could still feel the weight of that presence, could hear the subtle growl of an engine that wasn't mine. The hair on my forearm stood rigid beneath my jacket. Third rotation, I strained to see in the mirror, caught nothing but the red glow of my own taillights painting the empty road. The sedan had vanished, not turned off, not pulled away, but simply ceased to exist in the space it had occupied seconds before. I took the gravel exit, my hands trembling against the steering wheel, knuckles white as bone. The cattle pen materialized in my headlights a quarter-mile down, its weathered posts and rusted wire familiar from a dozen drives through this area. The cattle guard rattled beneath my tires as I pulled alongside the fence, that hollow metallic sound that always made me think of xylophones made from pipes. I needed to stop, needed to breathe, needed to convince myself that what had just happened had a rational explanation. The engine ticked as it cooled. Silence pressed against the windows. That complete absence of sound that only exists in places where humanity has barely made a dent. No insects, no wind, no distant traffic, just the weight of nothingness pressing against my eardrums until they ached. Then the radio came alive. Not music, not voices. A rhythmic static that pulsed like someone tapping on a microphone. Thump, thump, thump. Steady as a heartbeat, deliberate as Morse code. I hadn't touched the dial. The radio had been off since I'd started driving, preferring the silence to help me think through the meeting I'd attended in Boise. But now it breathed that electronic rhythm into the car's interior, and the green display showed no station, no frequency, just dashes where numbers should be. I reached for the power button. The tapping intensified, became almost frantic, like someone desperate to communicate. My finger hovered over the button but didn't press it. Something in that rhythm felt important. Felt like a warning or a plea or maybe both. Movement caught my peripheral vision. The fence posts were vibrating, not all at once, but in sequence. Starting from the far end near the road and rippling toward me like dominoes made of wood and wire. Each post hummed for a second before passing the vibration to the next, the wire between them singing a low, metallic note that made my teeth ache. The progression was slow, methodical, purposeful. It reminded me of watching someone run their finger along a piano keyboard, each note distinct but part of a larger melody I couldn't quite grasp. The vibration reached the post nearest my car and stopped. The wire continued to hum, but softer now, like it was waiting. The radio static shifted, became almost questioning. Thump, thump. And I found myself holding my breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. Light exploded in the distance. The roundabout I'd left behind, maybe half a mile back down the road, suddenly blazed with illumination. Every streetlight, lights I hadn't even noticed in my panic, flared to life simultaneously, creating a perfect circle of brightness in the ocean of darkness. It looked wrong, looked staged, like someone had dropped a spotlight on a single point of interest in an otherwise empty theater. But that wasn't the worst part. The sedan was there, circling the roundabout in an endless loop. Even from this distance, I could see it clearly in that unnatural brightness. Black paint gleaming, moving at a constant speed, never varying, never stopping. And the driver's door hung open, swinging slightly with each rotation, revealing an empty seat, no hands on the wheel, no shadow of a person inside. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Someone had jumped out, was hiding in the darkness, playing an elaborate prank. The car was on some kind of autopilot, a Tesla maybe, though it hadn't looked modern enough for that technology. The lights were on a timer I'd somehow triggered. The fence vibration was wind I couldn't feel, or settling wood, or animals I couldn't see. But my body knew better. My body understood that something fundamental had shifted, that the rules I'd lived by for 37 years no longer applied. The air in the car felt thicker, harder to breathe, like the atmospheric pressure had changed. My skin prickled with the sensation of being watched, not by eyes, but by something that didn't need eyes to see. The radio static changed again, became almost conversational. Thump, 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 thump. And I found myself responding out loud, my voice cracking in the silence. I asked what it wanted, told it I didn't understand, pleaded for it to make sense. The fence posts began vibrating again, but backwards this time, from my position toward the road, like they were pointing the way back. I started the engine. The radio went silent immediately, cutting off mid-thump. The fence stilled, but the roundabout continued to blaze with light, and the sedan continued its endless circle, door swinging with mechanical precision. I pulled back onto the gravel road, away from the spectacle behind me. Every instinct screamed to floor it, to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was happening in that circle of light. But something made me drive slowly, carefully, like sudden movements might trigger something worse. 5 miles down the road, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station, one of those fluorescent oases that promise normalcy and human contact. The attendant, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, looked up from his phone when I entered. I must have looked bad because his expression shifted from boredom to concern. He told me I was white as a sheet, asked if I needed him to call someone. I almost laughed. Who would I call? The police? Tell them what exactly? That a car had followed me and then disappeared? That fence posts had vibrated? That an empty vehicle was driving itself in circles? I bought a coffee I didn't want and sat in my car under the harsh lights of the station canopy, watching the road I'd come from. Part of me expected to see those headlights appear, expected the sedan to pull in beside me, ducker still open, still empty. But nothing came. After an hour, I drove on, took the long way home, avoided that stretch of road entirely. 3 days later, I looked up the location on Google Maps, needing to confirm the roundabout existed, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The satellite image showed the circle clearly, 3 exits just as I remembered, but in the center of the roundabout, where there should have been grass or decorative landscaping, there was something else. The image was too pixelated to make out clearly, but it looked like marks in the earth, patterns that seemed deliberate, almost like tracks worn by something circling endlessly. I zoomed in as far as the image would allow. The marks formed a perfect spiral, starting from the outer edge and coiling inward to a dark spot in the exact center. The date stamp on the image was from 2 years ago. The next week, I had to drive through that area again for work. I told myself I'd take the same route, prove to myself it had been exhaustion, stress, some kind of breakdown. But when I reached the turnoff, my hands steered me away without conscious thought, taking a detour that added 40 minutes to my journey. I've driven past that turnoff 6 times since then. Never taken it. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that sedan still circling, door still open, waiting for whatever was supposed to get in or whatever had gotten out. I think about those fence posts vibrating, pointing the way back. I think about the static on the radio, rhythmic and insistent, like it was trying to tell me something crucial that I was too human to understand. Last month, a colleague mentioned taking that route as a shortcut. I asked him, trying to sound casual, if he'd noticed anything unusual about the roundabout. He looked at me strangely, said there was no roundabout on that road, just a straight stretch between 2 farms. Insisted on showing me on his phone's GPS, and he was right. No circle, no 3 exits, just uninterrupted asphalt. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night and a car appears in my rearview mirror, following too close, I wonder if I'm still in that roundabout somehow, if I never really left, if the exit I took led nowhere but deeper into the circle. The fence posts outside my house have started humming lately, just occasionally, just for a few seconds, always at night. The rhythm is familiar, sequential, purposeful, like they're passing a message down the line. I've stopped looking out the window when it happens. I'm afraid of what I might see in the distance, afraid of lights appearing where no lights should be, afraid of recognizing a black sedan with its door hanging open, circling endlessly, waiting for someone or something to claim it, or maybe waiting for me to return. The radio in my car hasn't worked right since that night. It turns on randomly, always to static, always to that same rhythmic pattern, thump, 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 like a heartbeat that isn't mine, like a question I can't answer, like an invitation I'm terrified to accept but equally terrified to refuse. Because some circles, I'm learning, aren't meant to be broken. Some patterns, once observed, become part of you. And some roads, even when they disappear from maps and memory, never really let you go. They just wait, patient and eternal, for you to complete the rotation you started. Story 7. The diesel smell hit me first, thick and wrong, like something that had been rotting in metal for decades. We'd parked our rented SUV at the entrance to what remained of Copper Creek, one of those Colorado mining towns that died when the silver ran out in the 1890s. My 3 colleagues from the Geological Survey team stood beside me, their breath visible in the thin mountain air, though none of us spoke about the unnatural warmth that seemed to pulse from the abandoned buildings ahead. I'd suggested this detour. The guilt of that decision still crawls through my gut like broken glass. The town sprawled before us in various stages of decay, wooden structures leaning against time, their boards bleached gray by over a century of high-altitude sun. Windows stared back at us, dark and empty, except for the occasional glint that made you think something had just moved away from the glass. The wind carried more than just that diesel stench. There was something else underneath it, sweet and chemical, like antifreeze mixed with spoiled fruit. My colleague pointed toward the old company store, its facade surprisingly intact. That's when I saw it, the orange jumpsuit. It hung at ground level between 2 collapsed walls, swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. The fabric looked new, industrial orange so bright it hurt to look at in the afternoon sun. But it was the way it moved that made my skin crawl. The material bunched and stretched as if someone was crawling inside it, dragging themselves forward on their belly, though the suit never actually changed position. I took a step forward, squinting to make sense of what I was seeing. The jumpsuit continued its grotesque pantomime, the chest area pushing out, then deflating, the arms extending and retracting in a horrible rhythm that reminded me of an insect trying to escape its chrysalis. My colleague grabbed my shoulder, and I realized I'd been walking toward it without meaning to. We left. No discussion, no debate. 4 grown adults, professionals who'd spent years in remote locations, practically running back to our vehicle like spooked animals. The engine turned over on the 3rd try, and I reversed out of that place faster than was safe on the narrow mountain road. 20 minutes down the highway, someone finally spoke. Just 2 words that made everything worse. It's wet. The windshield was covered in moisture, condensation spreading across the glass from the inside, but it was a clear, dry night. Humidity near 0 at this elevation. I cranked up the defrost, but the moisture kept spreading, and that's when we saw them clearly. Handprints. Small, oily handprints pressed against the glass from the outside. Dozens of them, overlapping and smearing. They were child-sized but wrong. The proportions off, the fingers too long, too thin. I pulled over at the next wide spot in the road. We got out, all 4 of us, moving in that careful way people do when they're trying not to panic. The handprints covered not just the windshield but all the windows, even the rear glass we hadn't noticed in our escape. They were greasy, leaving rainbow sheens in the moonlight like motor oil on water. No fingerprints though, just smooth, featureless impressions. My colleague tried to wipe them away with his sleeve. then with paper towels from the glove compartment. The oil smeared but wouldn't absorb. Water from our bottles beat it up and rolled off. Even the windshield washer fluid, which could usually cut through anything, just pushed the grease around in sick, swirling patterns. We drove the rest of the way to Denver in silence, using the small clear patches between handprints to navigate. At a 24-hour supermarket on the outskirts of the city, we parked under the brightest lights we could find. The fluorescent glare made the handprints look like they were glowing, pulsing with their own sick light. We went inside, bought every cleaning product we could find: ammonia, bleach, industrial degreaser, even oven cleaner, and spent 2 hours scrubbing in the parking lot while late-night shoppers gave us wide berths. Nothing worked. The grease just sat there, defying chemistry, defying logic. Eventually, exhausted and reeking of chemicals, we gave up. We found a motel, took separate rooms, and agreed to deal with it in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that orange jumpsuit, writhing and crawling in place. Around 3 a.m. I gave up and walked back to the parking lot to check on the SUV. The handprints were still there, but something had changed. In the cold, pre-dawn air, they'd crystallized somehow, becoming more defined. And that's when I saw it. The texture. Each print now showed the clear impression of gloves, complete with visible stitching along the seams. Children's gloves. Winter gloves. The kind with cartoon characters on them, maybe. Except each glove had only 3 fingers. I stood there in that empty parking lot, my breath coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with the altitude. 3 fingers. Not like fingers were missing, like they were designed that way. Made that way. The stitching was perfect, professional, following the contours of those impossible hands. By sunrise, the prints had changed again. Now they showed wear patterns. Thin spots where the fabric had worn through, patches where repairs had been made. Some had tiny labels visible, with text too small to read but clearly present. They were aging before our eyes, showing years of use in hours. My colleagues found me sitting on the curb, staring at the vehicle. One of them had his phone out, taking pictures, but when he showed me the screen, the glass just looked dirty. No handprints, no glove impressions, just general grime. We tried 3 different cameras with the same result. Whatever we were seeing, technology couldn't capture it. The rental company charged us for the vehicle, said we'd returned it, contaminated with an unknown substance that couldn't be removed. They had to total it, crush it for scrap. The insurance claim was denied, but that's not what keeps me awake at night. It's what I found when I got home and unpacked my equipment. My geological samples from the survey, sealed in sterile containers, were covered in the same oily residue inside the sealed containers. The samples I'd collected before we ever went to Copper Creek. The timestamps on the containers showed dates from a week ago, but the oil was fresh, still spreading. I had them analyzed at 3 different labs. Each one gave different results. The first said it was synthetic motor oil mixed with organic compounds they couldn't identify. The second claimed it was biological, sebaceous secretions, but from no known mammal. The third lab refused to complete the analysis. They just sent my samples back with a note: "Please do not contact us again." That was 6 months ago. The oil is still spreading. It appears on things I haven't touched in years, in rooms I haven't entered. My winter gloves, stored in the attic since I moved to Arizona, are soaked through with it. Sometimes late at night I find new handprints on my windows. 3-fingered prints that weren't there an hour before. I've stopped trying to clean them. I've stopped trying to understand. But I can't stop thinking about that jumpsuit, crawling in place in a dead town that shouldn't smell like diesel. I can't stop wondering what was inside it, or what was trying to get out. Last week I got a call from one of my colleagues from that trip. He spoke in a whisper, said he couldn't explain over the phone. When I met him at a diner outside Phoenix, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He pulled out his phone, showed me a video from a security camera at his daughter's daycare. The footage was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. A figure in an orange jumpsuit, crawling across the parking lot at 3 a.m., moving exactly like the one we'd seen in Copper Creek, that horrible insectile dragging motion. But this one was actually moving, covering ground, leaving a trail of something dark and wet behind it. The timestamp showed it was recorded the same night we'd fled the ghost town, the same exact time we were scrubbing the windshield in that Denver supermarket parking lot. His daughter's daycare is in Maine, 3,000 miles from Colorado. He asked me what I thought it meant. I told him the truth, that I didn't know, that I was starting to think we weren't meant to know, that maybe some things exist in the spaces between what's real and what's possible, and looking too hard at them lets them look back. But that's not really the truth. The truth is that I do know what it means. It means we brought something back with us from Copper Creek, something that doesn't follow the rules of distance or time, something that leaves three-fingered handprints because that's all it has, something that wears orange jumpsuits because that's what it was wearing when it stopped being human, if it ever was human at all. The truth is that every night, I dream of those Colorado mountains, and in my dreams, the diesel smell is stronger. In my dreams, I can hear breathing inside that jumpsuit, wet, labored breathing that sounds like it's coming through liquid. In my dreams, I understand that the handprints aren't trying to get in. They're marking what's already theirs. This morning I found an orange thread on my pillow. Just one thread. Synthetic. The kind they use in industrial safety equipment. It was wet with that same oil, fresh enough to stain my fingers when I picked it up. I've been sitting here for hours, staring at it, trying to convince myself it came from something else, anything else. But I know better. We all know better now. Whatever we saw in Copper Creek, whatever crawled inside that jumpsuit, it's not done with us. Maybe it never will be. Maybe that's the real horror. Not that something followed us home, but that we were always meant to find it. That it was waiting there in that dead town, patient as stone, knowing that eventually someone would come. Someone would see. Someone would carry it back into the world. The thread is starting to move. Not much. Just a slight writhing, like something microscopic is crawling along its length. I should burn it. I should burn everything. My clothes from that trip, my equipment, maybe even the whole house. But I won't, because part of me needs to know what happens next. Part of me has already accepted that whatever's coming, I invited it in the moment I suggested that detour. And maybe that's the worst realization of all. That on some level I can't quite access. I knew what we'd find there. That something in me recognized something in that place and wanted to bring it home. The handprints on my window are changing again. Now they show wear patterns I recognize. The patches, the thin spots. They match my work gloves perfectly. The ones I was wearing in Copper Creek. The ones that only had 3 fingers when I looked at them this morning. Story 8. The wind chime should have been my first warning. Not a proper wind chime, really. Just a strip of heavy canvas cloth I'd found hanging from the front door handle when I moved in. Previous tenant must have left it. I kept meaning to throw it away, but something about its weathered texture, the way it caught the Pennsylvania autumn light, made me leave it be. That was before it started moving on its own. I'd rented the house because it was cheap and isolated, exactly what I needed after the divorce. Half a mile from the abandoned Willowbrook State Hospital, the realtor had mentioned, as if that explained the bargain price. I didn't care. The hospital had been closed since '87, just another relic of Pennsylvania's institutional past rotting behind chain-link fences. From my kitchen window, I could see its eastern wing through the trees, broken windows like dead eyes, watching. The first 3 weeks were perfect. I worked from home, designing websites during the day, and spent evenings on the porch with a beer, watching the sun bleed out behind the hospital's silhouette. The house creaked and settled like old houses do. The furnace kicked on with a shudder that rattled the pipes. Normal sounds. Comforting even. Then came that Tuesday night in October. I was working late, headphones on, when movement in my peripheral vision made me look up. The cloth strip on the door was rotating, not swaying in a breeze, but turning in slow, deliberate circles. Clockwise. Pause. counterclockwise. The front door was closed. The windows were shut against the cold. No draft could explain it. I pulled off my headphones and approached the door. The cloth stopped moving the instant I touched the handle. Outside, the night was still, not even a whisper of wind. I told myself it must have been air pressure from the heating system, some quirk of the old house's ventilation. But my hands trembled slightly as I went back to my desk. That was the beginning. Over the next few nights, I started noticing things. Subtle at first. A shadow passing under the door when no one was outside. The sensation of being watched from the empty hallway. The house felt different after dark, as if it were holding its breath. Waiting. The footsteps started the following Thursday, somewhere around 3 a.m. Slow, measured. Each step deliberate and heavy on the stairs. Not the random creaking of old wood. This had rhythm, purpose. I lay frozen in bed, listening to them ascend. 1, 2, 3. They stopped at the landing. My bedroom door was cracked open, and through it, I could see the faint hallway light I always left on. A shadow moved across the gap. I forced myself up, grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside the bed. My bare feet were silent on the cold floor as I crept to the door. The hallway stretched before me, empty except for... Was that a gray hoodie disappearing around the corner? Just a flash of gray fabric there and gone. I searched every room, checked every window, every door. Nothing. No signs of entry. The front door was still locked, the cloth strip hanging motionless. I called the police at dawn, feeling foolish, but unable to shake the certainty that someone had been in my house. The officers were professional but skeptical. They found no evidence of forced entry, no footprints in the dust of unused rooms, nothing missing. One of them, an older guy with kind eyes, suggested I might have been dreaming. Stress from the divorce, he said gently, living alone in an isolated place. It happens. But I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. I installed new locks, security bars on the ground floor windows. I bought motion sensor lights for outside and a camera for the hallway. For a few nights, nothing happened. I started to relax, even felt embarrassed about my panic. Then the camera captured something that made my blood turn to ice water. At 3:17 a.m., a figure in a gray hoodie walked past the camera, face obscured by the hood, moving with that same measured pace I'd heard on the stairs. But here's what made me replay the footage over and over, my hands shaking. The figure appeared at the top of the stairs, walked down the hallway, and simply wasn't there anymore. No one leaving, no door opening. Like it had dissolved into the walls themselves. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, or the next. It was my neighbor, old Raymond from the farm up the road, who finally gave me a piece of the puzzle. He stopped by one afternoon to return a wheelbarrow he'd borrowed, and I must have looked like hell because he asked if I was feeling all right. When I mentioned I'd been having trouble sleeping, maybe hearing things at night, his weathered face went serious. He told me then about the kidnapping in '74. A patient from Willowbrook, dangerous one, he said, had escaped during a transfer. Grabbed a maintenance worker right off the hospital grounds. They found the worker's body 3 days later in the woods, but the patient was never caught. Raymond leaned in close, and I could smell tobacco on his breath. The thing was, he said, the maintenance worker had lived in this house. My house. Back when the hospital still provided housing for senior staff. I laughed nervously, told him he was pulling my leg. But Raymond wasn't smiling. He said folks around here had stories, lights in windows when the house was empty, things moving on their own. The family that lived here in the '90s lasted 6 months before leaving everything behind. Furniture, clothes, even their cat. After Raymond left, I couldn't stop thinking about his story. That night, I found myself at my laptop, searching old newspaper archives. The kidnapping was real. I found the articles, though the details were sparse. Patient name withheld. Maintenance worker found deceased. Investigation ongoing. But it was what I found the next day that really shattered my grip on rational explanation. I was fixing a leak in the upstairs bathroom when I noticed the attic access panel above the stairs wasn't sitting flush. When I climbed up to adjust it, my hand hit something wedged in the insulation. A laminated ID badge, yellowed with age. The The photo was too faded to make out clearly, but the text was still legible. A name I didn't recognize, and below it, Ward C, Willowbrook State Hospital. My hands were shaking as I climbed down. Ward C. I'd researched enough to know that was the maximum security wing, where they kept the violent cases. What was this doing in my attic? Who had hidden it there? That night, I didn't even pretend to sleep. I sat on the living room couch with every light in the house on, the baseball bat across my knees, watching that cloth strip on the door. Around 2 a.m., exhaustion started pulling at me. My eyes grew heavy despite the fear, despite the lights. I must have dozed for a moment because suddenly I jerked awake to find the room darker. Several bulbs had burned out simultaneously, and the cloth strip was moving again. But this time, it wasn't random. As I watched, frozen, it twisted and turned in specific patterns. The way it caught the remaining light, the shadows it cast on the door. They formed shapes, letters, S-T-A-Y over and over. Stay, stay, stay. I ran, grabbed my keys and phone and ran to my car, not even stopping to put on shoes. I drove to a motel 20 miles away and checked in under a false name, paranoid that somehow, something might follow me. But here's the thing. I went back. The next morning, in broad daylight, I went back, because my laptop was there, my work, my life. And because in the harsh light of day, it all seemed impossible. A stress-induced breakdown, maybe. Hallucinations brought on by isolation and Raymond's ghost story. The house was exactly as I'd left it. Lights still on, door still locked, cloth strip hanging limp and innocent. I packed a bag, gathered my work things, told myself I'd stay in the motel until I could find a new place. But as I was leaving, something made me look at the cloth strip one more time. In the noon sun, I could see marks on it I'd never noticed before. Faint brown stains that might have been rust or might have been something else, and letters, barely visible, written in faded ink along its edge. The same name as on the ID badge. I stood there in my doorway, bag in hand, staring at that piece of cloth. Evidence of what? That a patient had been here? That the maintenance worker had kept a souvenir? That someone was playing an elaborate, cruel joke? Or that something was still here, had never left, was asking me to stay? I've been at the motel for 3 days now. I called the realtor, told her I was breaking the lease. She didn't seem surprised, but every night I dream about that house, about footsteps on the stairs, about gray hoodies and wind chimes and messages spelled out in shadow. And every morning, I wake up with the absolute certainty that I'm going to go back. Because here's what I can't stop thinking about. What if it wasn't telling me to stay? What if it was begging? What if whatever haunts that house isn't the escaped patient at all, but the maintenance worker who never really left? Trapped somehow, trying to warn others, spelling out desperate messages with whatever means it has. Or maybe that's just what I tell myself because the alternative is worse. That there's something in that house that wants me there, needs me there, and that despite every rational thought, despite the fear that turns my stomach to acid, I'm going to go back. Because the pull is too strong. Because some part of me needs to know. Because maybe I never really left at all. I check out of the motel tomorrow. The realtor says she'll meet me at the house to handle the paperwork for breaking the lease. But I already know what's going to happen. She'll arrive to find my car in the driveway, the front door open, that cloth strip turning in its endless circles. And I'll be inside, part of whatever story that house has been telling for decades. The worst part? I can feel myself accepting it. The fear is fading into something else. Curiosity, maybe, or resignation. Or perhaps it's recognition. Perhaps some houses choose their tenants, and some tenants were always meant to stay. I'm driving back now. It's getting dark, and I can see the hospital through the trees. Its broken windows catching the last of the daylight. The cloth strip will be moving when I arrive. The footsteps will come at 3 a.m. And this time, I won't run. This time, I'll follow them. Because I finally understand what the house has been trying to tell me. It's not a warning. It's not a threat. It's an invitation. and I've already accepted. Story 9. The fluorescent lights above me hummed their familiar dirge, a sound I'd grown to hate over 3 years of graveyard shifts at this convenience store off Highway 26. Oregon nights have a particular quality to them, thick with moisture that never quite becomes rain, pressing against the windows like something trying to get in. Tonight felt different, though I couldn't say why. The air tasted metallic, like pennies on my tongue. It was 2:47 a.m. when he walked in. I noticed him immediately because of how he moved, not the shuffling gait of truckers needing coffee, or the purposeful stride of locals grabbing cigarettes. He flowed into the store, smooth and deliberate, like oil spreading across water. Average height, average build, wearing clothes so unremarkable they seemed designed to be forgotten. But his eyes, God, his eyes were wrong. Too bright under the harsh store lighting, reflecting like a nocturnal animal's. He drifted toward the refrigerated section, and I watched him on the security monitor behind the counter. The way he moved between the aisles made my skin crawl. He wasn't shopping. He was timing things. I could see it in the subtle tilt of his head when the door chimed, the way his fingers tapped against his thigh in a steady rhythm, counting seconds, measuring distances. A trucker came in, grabbed an energy drink, and left. The man noted it. A woman with tired eyes bought formula and diapers. He watched her go. Each time someone entered or exited, he adjusted his position slightly, like a chess player considering moves 3 steps ahead. My hands grew clammy against the counter's worn laminate surface. The familiar weight of the panic button under the register called to me. But what would I say? That a customer was walking around too precisely? Through the window, I spotted it. A sedan parked at the edge of the lot where the security lights didn't quite reach. Dark color, maybe blue or black. No plates. The engine was running. I could see the faint shimmer of exhaust in the cold air. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, just a shadow behind tinted glass. The man in my store had made 3 complete circuits of the aisles now, never picking up a single item. His path reminded me of something, and then it clicked. He was mapping blind spots, places where the cameras couldn't see. My mouth went dry. A woman approached the counter with a basket of groceries, protein bars, bottled water, first aid supplies, road trip provisions. She looked to be in her 40s, competent and alert despite the hour. As she set her items on the counter, the man positioned himself near the chips display, precisely between her and the exit. My hands trembled as I scanned her items. The store felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. The fluorescent buzz grew louder, drilling into my skull. I grabbed a receipt from the printer and flipped it over, scrawling quickly, "Please stay here with me." When I handed her the change, I pressed the note into her palm, making eye contact. Her expression shifted, confusion, then understanding, then carefully controlled calm. She nodded almost imperceptibly and made a show of checking her phone. "Oh, damn," she said, her voice steady. "My sister's calling. Mind if I take this here? The reception outside is terrible." I nodded, grateful beyond words. She stepped to the side, pantomiming a phone conversation while keeping her body angled toward the door. The man's jaw tightened. His careful choreography had been disrupted. That's when I heard it. The distant sound of a sheriff's cruiser on the highway. The distinctive rumble of the V8 engine grew closer. The man's head snapped toward the sound with inhuman quickness. For a moment, he stood perfectly still. And I mean perfectly. Not even breathing that I could see. The cruiser passed without slowing, its headlights sweeping across the store's windows. The man took 2 measured steps toward my counter. Our eyes met, and looking into them was like staring into an endless tunnel. The overhead lights flickered, just once, but enough to make my heart skip. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the blood rushing in my ears. Then he smiled. Not with his mouth. His lips never moved, but somehow his entire face conveyed amusement. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My breath came out in a visible puff, which shouldn't have been possible in the heated store. The woman beside me gasped softly. I glanced at her for just a second, saw her face had gone pale. When I looked back, the man was moving toward the aisles. He walked backward, maintaining eye contact, that non-smile still radiating from his features. He reached the third aisle, snacks and candy, and stepped behind an end cap display. He didn't come out the other side. I waited 5 seconds. 10, 20. The woman and I stood frozen, watching the spot where he'd vanished. The store's ambient sounds seemed amplified. The hum of refrigerators, the tick of the wall clock, my own ragged breathing. "Did you see where—" the woman began. I was already moving, grabbing the aluminum bat we kept behind the counter. My legs felt like they were moving through molasses as I approached the aisle. The woman followed, her car keys jutting between her fingers like claws. The aisle was empty, not just empty of him. It felt empty of everything, like a vacuum had sucked out all the warmth and life. The candy bars and chips sat on their shelves, but they looked wrong somehow, like photographs of themselves. I reached out to touch a bag of pretzels and jerked my hand back. It was ice cold, covered in a thin layer of frost. The woman and I searched every aisle, checked the bathroom, the storage room. Nothing. The back door was still locked from the inside, its deadbolt untouched. There was nowhere he could have gone, but he was gone. 20 minutes later, the sheriff's cruiser returned, lights flashing this time. Deputy Harrison, whom I knew from his regular coffee stops, looked grim as he entered. He told us they'd caught someone a mile down the road, the driver of the sedan. The man had been sitting in his car with the engine running, a hunting knife on his lap, waiting. For what, he wouldn't say, but here's what made my blood run cold. The deputy said the man claimed he was waiting for his partner to come back from inside the store. "But we only caught one guy," Harrison said, frowning. "Nobody else in the vehicle. You sure someone was in here?" The woman and I exchanged glances. We both nodded. Harrison reviewed the security footage with us. We watched the man enter, watched him circle the store, watched him approach the counter. Then at 3:03 a.m. when he stepped into the third aisle, the camera feed cut to static. Not all the cameras, just the one covering that specific spot. For exactly 1 minute. When the feed returned, the aisle was empty. "Probably a malfunction," Harrison said, but his voice was uncertain. "Old system, could be anything." But I knew it wasn't a malfunction. The way that static looked on the screen, it wasn't random. There were patterns in it, shapes that almost made sense if you stared long enough. I found myself leaning closer to the monitor, trying to decipher them, until the woman pulled me back. The sheriff's department increased patrols for the next few weeks. The woman, I learned she was a nurse driving to Portland for a new job, stopped by the next night to check on me. We never talked about what we'd seen, not directly, but she left me her number, told me to call if I ever needed anything. I started keeping a journal of the strange things that happened after that night. Little things at first, products moving when I wasn't looking, cold spots that shouldn't exist, shadows in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned. Then bigger things, customers I'd swear I'd served before, but who insisted they'd never been in the store. Security footage showing me talking to people who weren't there. Timestamps that didn't match my memory of events. 3 months later, I was reviewing old security footage for inventory discrepancies when I found something that made me quit the next day. It was from the night before the incident, around the same time. The camera showed me working alone, nothing unusual. But in the reflection on the glass door, for just a frame or two, there was someone else behind the counter with me, standing exactly where I stood, moving exactly as I moved, like a double exposure. I enhanced the image as much as the old system would allow. The figure's face was turned toward the camera, and while it was blurry, I could make out one clear detail. It was smiling, that same non-smile I'd seen on the stranger's face. I drove home that morning taking a different route than usual, paranoid about being followed. When I got to my apartment, I found something that stopped me cold. On my kitchen table was a receipt from the store, one I didn't remember bringing home. The timestamp read 3:03 a.m., the exact minute the camera had gone to static. But the date was wrong. It was dated for tomorrow. I didn't go back to check if it was a mistake. I packed what I could fit in my car and left Oregon that afternoon. Found work at a warehouse in Nevada, far from any convenience stores, far from late-night shifts. But sometimes, when I'm alone, and the lights flicker just right, I catch glimpses and reflections. In windows, mirrors, puddles of water. A figure standing just behind me, matching my movements perfectly. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, I hear that fluorescent hum, even though there are no fluorescent lights in my apartment. I've stopped looking at security cameras altogether. I'm afraid of what I might see, or worse, what I might not see when I know something should be there. The woman still texts me occasionally, always at 3:03 a.m. The messages are normal, hoping I'm well, sharing updates about her life in Portland, but she always ends them the same way. Do you ever wonder if he really left? I don't reply anymore. Because deep down, in that place where instinct lives below rational thought, I know the answer. He didn't leave. He never left. He's in that space between frames, that moment of static, that blind spot just outside our perception, waiting. And sometimes, late at night when I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I can feel him there, standing in that impossible space, counting seconds, measuring distances, planning something I'm grateful I'll never understand. The sedan, they told me later, had been reported stolen 3 states away. Its owner had been found in his home, alive but catatonic, staring at static on his television screen. He'd been like that for a week before anyone noticed. The doctors couldn't explain it. Physically, nothing was wrong with him. He just wasn't there anymore. I think about him sometimes, wonder if he saw what I saw, if he looked too long into that static and found something looking back. I wonder if that's what's happening to me now. This slow dissolution of certainty, this creeping feeling that reality has developed cracks I can't quite see but can definitely feel. Last week, I found a note in my handwriting that I don't remember writing. The static is spreading. I've started avoiding mirrors. It's easier that way. Easier not to see the fraction of a second delay in my reflection. Easier not to notice how sometimes it smiles when I'm not smiling. The fluorescent hum is getting louder. Story 10. The voucher still sits on my kitchen counter 3 weeks later. I've memorized every detail. The faded blue logo of Desert Suds 24-hour car wash. The serial number that doesn't match their usual format. And those 5 words scrawled in ballpoint pen that turn my blood to ice water. Come back at dawn hours. I should throw it away. I should have thrown it away the morning I found it. But every time I reach for it, my hand stops, trembling just above the paper, as if some invisible force field surrounds it. Or maybe I'm just afraid that touching it again will make everything that happened that night more real than I can handle. It started with my usual evening run through the Sunny Slope subdivision, one of those sprawling Arizona developments where every house looks identical under the sodium streetlights. 10 o'clock, still 85 degrees, the asphalt radiating heat like a pizza stone. I'd been running this route for 6 months since moving here for work. Same 3-mile loop, same playlist, same everything. Routine was my anchor in a new city where I knew nobody. The van appeared in my peripheral vision first, a rust-eaten Dodge from the early 90s, powder blue paint flaking off like diseased skin. It rolled alongside me at jogging pace, maybe 15 feet away. Through my earbuds, I could hear the engine's unhealthy rattle, metal grinding against metal in ways that suggested imminent mechanical failure. I pulled out one earbud and glanced over. The driver, a thin man with a face that seemed to blur at the edges, as if I couldn't quite focus on his features, raised his hand in what might have been a wave. The gesture felt wrong, too slow, like he was moving through water. In the back, 2 women sat perfectly still, their faces pressed against the window. Not just looking at me, studying me, with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Their eyes didn't blink. I counted. 5 seconds. 10. 15. No blinking. Their mouths hung slightly open, and I swear I could see their breath fogging the glass even though the night was sweltering. The driver rolled down his window. The mechanism squealed, a sound like fingernails on metal. He said something I couldn't quite hear over my remaining earbud. I pulled it out. "What?" I kept jogging, trying to maintain normalcy. His voice came out wet, like he was speaking through a mouthful of syrup. The words seemed to reach me a half-second after his lips moved, creating a disorienting disconnect between sight and sound. I said, "Why don't you come party with us, man? We got everything you need." The women in the back remained motionless, still staring. One of them, I couldn't tell which, made a sound that might have been laughter or might have been choking. The noise seemed to come from somewhere deeper in the van, not from either of their throats. "I'm good, thanks." I picked up my pace. The van matched it, engine protesting with a new symphony of mechanical agony. The driver leaned further out his window, and I caught a smell rolling off him. Not body odor exactly, but something organic and wrong, like meat left in the sun. "Come on, don't be like that. The girls really want to meet you. They've been talking about you." That stopped me cold. I'd never seen this van before, never seen these people. How could they have been talking about me? "I don't know you," I said, still moving but slower now, every muscle tense to sprint. "Sure you do." His grin revealed teeth that seemed too numerous for his mouth. "We've been watching you run. Every night, same route, very predictable." My chest tightened. I'd varied my schedule, hadn't I? Different times, sometimes skipping days. But thinking back, I realized I couldn't actually remember the last time I deviated from 10 o'clock. The car wash sign blazed neon blue 100 yards ahead. Desert Suds, open 24 hours, though I'd never seen a customer there past 9. I cut hard left across the empty parking lot, my shoes slapping against oil-stained concrete. Behind me, tires squealed. The van's headlights swung wide, painting my shadow long and distorted across the car wash bay. I ducked inside, past the automated brushes that hung like massive curtains, and crouched behind the change machine in the corner where the security camera had a blind spot. The van circled the building once, twice, then parked at the exit. Engine running. Waiting. My breathing echoed in the empty bay, too loud, surely loud enough for them to hear. The fluorescent lights hummed with an electric anxiety that matched my racing pulse. Soap residue on the concrete made rainbow patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in my peripheral vision. Then the brushes started moving, slow at first, just a whisper of motion, the massive blue and white strips beginning their mechanical dance. The spray nozzles hissed to life, shooting water at nothing. The undercarriage wash erupted in a fountain of mist. The entire apparatus ran through its complete cycle. Pre-soak, soap, rinse, wax, dry. All for a car that wasn't there. I pressed myself harder against the wall, feeling the cold metal of the change machine against my spine. Through the chaos of spray and spinning brushes, I could see something moving through the wash. Not a car, a shape, roughly car-sized but wrong, undulating like liquid, letting the brushes pass through it while somehow still triggering all the sensors. The smell hit me then, that same organic wrongness from the van driver, but stronger, mixed with industrial soap and something chemical that made my eyes water. The shape in the wash bay pulsed, expanded, contracted, as if breathing, as if enjoying the attention of the machines. When the cycle ended, the shape was gone. So was the van. I stayed crouched there for another hour, maybe 2, time losing meaning in the fluorescent purgatory of the empty car wash. When I finally emerged, my legs cramped and shaking, the night felt different. The air tasted metallic. The streetlights seemed dimmer, their sodium glow unable to fully penetrate the darkness between them. I ran home faster than I'd ever run before, taking a different route, doubling back twice to make sure nothing followed. My apartment building appeared like salvation, its mundane architecture suddenly beautiful in its normalcy. The voucher was centered perfectly on my doormat when I arrived, despite the absence of any wind that could have positioned it so precisely. Desert Suds 24-hour car wash. One free supreme wash, no expiration date. And in blue ballpoint pen, in handwriting that looked almost like my own, but not quite. Come back at dawn hours. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third night, exhaustion forced me under. But the dreams that came were worse than waking. Dreams of running through endless car washes, the brushes getting closer with each pass, water rising around my ankles, my knees, my chest. Dreams of the van always in my rearview mirror, no matter which way I turned. Dreams of those women in the back seat, except sometimes they had my face. I stopped running, stopped leaving the apartment after dark. But things started happening anyway. My bathroom faucet began dripping in a rhythm that sounded like footsteps. The pattern would change, sometimes running, sometimes walking, sometimes a dragging shuffle that made my skin crawl. When I called the landlord, he found nothing wrong with the pipes. My car developed a smell. That organic wrongness, faint but persistent, I had it detailed twice. The smell remained. The detailer mentioned finding an unusual residue in the undercarriage, something that didn't match any automotive fluid he knew. He asked if I'd been running over roadkill. I hadn't been driving anywhere except work and back, avoiding that stretch of road with the car wash entirely. The mailman started leaving my packages at other apartments. When confronted, he swore he'd been delivering them to my door, described conversations we'd had that I couldn't remember. He mentioned I'd been coming and going at odd hours, sometimes leaving at 3 or 4 in the morning. I showed him my phone's location history, proving I'd been home. He looked at me with something between pity and fear. My coworkers began avoiding me. Subtle at first, taking different elevators, sitting farther away in meetings. Then someone let slip that I'd been seen at Desert Suds at dawn, just standing in the bay, letting the brushes run over me again and again. They had security footage, they said. I demanded to see it. The footage showed someone who looked exactly like me, moved like me, wore my clothes. But I knew I'd been in bed, paralyzed by nightmares I couldn't quite remember upon waking. The voucher changed. Not all at once, but gradually. The serial number would have different digits when I looked again. The logo shifted slightly, the car in the image sometimes facing left, sometimes right. The handwritten message grew longer. Come back at dawn hours when the wash is hungry. I installed cameras in my apartment. Every morning, I'd review the footage, and every morning, there would be gaps. Not deleted, the timestamp would jump, as if time itself had skipped. During these gaps, things moved. Small things. A glass of water would be empty. My running shoes would be by the door instead of in the closet. The voucher would be in a different position, sometimes folded, sometimes not. Last week I woke with soap in my hair. Not shampoo, industrial car wash soap, the kind that burns if it gets in your eyes. My sheets were damp, smelling of that synthetic cherry scent they use in the premium wash. My feet were clean but raw, as if they'd been scrubbed by something rough. The voucher was on my pillow, and the message had changed again. You've been coming back every dawn, but you still haven't paid. I called in sick to work, spent the day researching. Desert Suds had been closed for 3 years according to county records, shut down after a series of incidents that weren't elaborated upon in public documents. But when I drove past that night, keeping my doors locked, not stopping, the signs blazed blue and open. The lot empty, but the lights on. The brushes moving lazily in the bay as if stretching. The van has started appearing in other places, parked outside the grocery store, idling at the bus stop, always empty when I look directly at it, but in my peripheral vision, I swear I can see shapes in the windows. The 2 women are different now. Sometimes there are 3, sometimes 1. Sometimes they look like people I know, sometimes they look like me. My landlord called yesterday. Noise complaints, he said. Residents reporting someone running up and down the halls at 3 in the morning, soaking wet, leaving puddles that smell like car soap. He has footage, he says. He wants to meet. I know what the footage will show. I know what I'll see. Someone who looks like me, moves like me, but whose eyes don't blink for 15, 20, 30 seconds at a time. Someone whose mouth moves a half second before the words come out. Someone who goes to the car wash at dawn and stands in the bay while something car-sized but not a car moves through the brushes with them. The voucher is changing as I write this. The words crawl across the paper like living things. Come back at dawn hours when the wash is hungry and the van is waiting, and the water knows your name, and you're already here anyway, aren't you? I check my location history obsessively now. It shows me at home every night. But my running app tells a different story. 3 miles every dawn, same route, ending at Desert Suds. The timestamps overlap. I'm in 2 places at once, or nowhere at all, or everywhere in between. Tomorrow is dawn. I can feel it pulling at me already, like gravity, like magnetism, like something deeper than physics. The voucher is warm to the touch now, pulsing with a rhythm that matches my heartbeat. Or maybe my heartbeat is matching it. I can't tell anymore. I think I understand now. The van, the car wash, the voucher, they're not the trap. They're the bait. The trap is something else, something that's been closing around me slowly for 3 weeks, tightening with each sleepless night and each impossible morning. The trap is the space between sleeping and waking, between here and there, between who I am and who's been going to the car wash at dawn. The sun is setting now. In a few hours, it will be tomorrow's dawn. I'll either go to the car wash or discover I've already been there. I'll either use the voucher or find it's already been redeemed. I'll either meet whatever waits in the van or realize I've been riding in it all along. The brushes are already spinning in my dreams. The water knows my name. I'm so very, very tired. And somewhere, in a rust-eaten van that should have died years ago, 2 women who might be 3 or 1 or none at all are pressed against the window, watching without blinking, waiting for someone who's already there. Story 11. The pager shouldn't have vibrated that night. Not at 3:47 a.m. Not with those numbers. Not when I was alone in the station's sleeping quarters with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the memory of Christmas Eve still burning behind my eyelids. I've been a paramedic for 12 years. You learn to trust your equipment, your training, your instincts. You learn that reality has edges, boundaries, rules. What happened that winter made me question all of it. It started on Christmas Eve. The call came through dispatch at 11:23 p.m. Unconscious person in vehicle. Possible carbon monoxide exposure. The address led us to a cul-de-sac on the town's eastern edge, where the streetlights gave up and the houses turned their backs to the woods. The SUV sat at the dead end like a monument to bad decisions. Engine running, exhaust forming ghosts in the December cold. My partner that night was working his last shift before retirement. He approached from the driver's side while I took the passengers. Through the fogged glass, I could make out a figure slumped over the steering wheel. The doors were locked. We had to break the passenger window. The smell hit first. Not carbon monoxide, which has no smell, but something else. Sweet and metallic, like copper pennies soaked in sugar water. The man inside was breathing, barely. Late 40s, maybe 50, wearing a business suit that had seen better days. A revolver lay on the passenger seat, cylinder open, chambers empty. 6 brass casings glinted on the floor mat. But it was the note that made my skin crawl. Clutched in his right hand, written in what looked like charcoal on yellowed paper. Half an address. Just numbers. 1847. No street name, no city, nothing else. We worked quickly, established an airway, started oxygen, loaded him onto the stretcher. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that the trees were leaning in, that the darkness beyond the streetlights was somehow more substantial than it should be. My partner felt it too. I could tell by the way he kept checking over his shoulder, by how quickly he wanted to leave. The hospital was 20 minutes away. The man's vitals improved during transport, but he never woke up, never said a word. The ER took him, and that should have been the end of it. Another shift, another save, another mystery that wasn't mine to solve. Except it wasn't the end. The next night, I was back at the station. Most of the crew had gone home to salvage what was left of Christmas with their families. I volunteered to stay. No family of my own, nowhere special to be. Around 3:47 a.m., my pager went off. The display showed 1847. Just those 4 numbers, nothing else. No callback number, no unit designation. I checked the dispatch system. No active calls, no pages sent to my unit. I called dispatch directly. They had no record of any page. I told myself it was equipment malfunction. Old pagers did strange things sometimes, but my hands were shaking as I set it back on the nightstand, and I didn't sleep the rest of the night. For months after, nothing happened. Winter melted into spring, spring bloomed into summer. I almost forgot about the incident, filed it away with all the other strange calls that pepper a paramedic's career. Almost. Then came the August call. Another unconscious person, this time in an apartment complex downtown. Routine overdose. We got them stable and transported without issue. But on the ride back, my radio started acting up. Static filled the channel, so I switched to the municipal frequency to test the equipment. That's when I heard my own voice, clear as day, recorded, asking, "Dispatch, can you confirm the house number?" I knew it was my voice, the slight rasp from years of night shifts, the way I elongated certain vowels. But I had never said those words, never made that transmission. Then came the whisper. Not my voice anymore, but something that barely sounded human, like wind through a broken throat. Warwick Street, 1847. Warwick Street. My partner was driving. She asked if I was okay. Apparently I'd gone pale as death. I told her I needed some air, had her drop me at the station while she refueled the rig. I knew where Warwick Street was. It was in that same cul-de-sac where we'd found the SUV on Christmas Eve. I shouldn't have gone back. Every instinct, every shred of common sense told me to leave it alone, but I had to know, had to see. I drove my personal vehicle, arrived just as the sun was setting. The cul-de-sac looked different in summer, greener, less ominous. The houses were modest, well-kept, numbered sequentially, 1841, 1843, 1845. Then nothing. Where 1847 should have been, there was only an empty lot. Not abandoned, empty, as if nothing had ever been built there. Grass grew wild and tall, undisturbed except for 2 deep grooves in the earth, tire tracks, fresh enough that the grass hadn't sprung back yet. I got out of my car, walked to the edge of the lot. The air felt thicker there, like breathing through wet cotton. The sweet metallic smell from Christmas Eve drifted on the breeze, stronger now. The tall grass whispered without wind to move it. That's when I saw the foundation. Buried beneath years of overgrowth, barely visible, were the remains of a house's foundation. Concrete and rebar, scorched black as if by intense fire. I knelt down, brushed away some of the vegetation. The concrete was cold, not just cool, but actively cold, like it was pulling heat from the air around it. My pager vibrated. This time it displayed, "You were there." I ran, stumbled through the tall grass, threw myself into my car, peeled out of that cul-de-sac like hell itself was chasing me. But here's the thing about being a paramedic. You can't just quit. You can't just stop showing up. The job is in your blood, under your skin, wrapped around your bones. So I kept working, kept responding to calls. But things were different now. Every unconscious person we found seemed to have that same sweet metallic smell clinging to them. Every empty house we entered for a welfare check felt like it was holding its breath. And the pager, God, the pager wouldn't stop. Different messages now, coordinates, times. Sometimes just single words, remember, return, witness. I started keeping a log, trying to make sense of it. The coordinates led to places I'd been, not just on calls, but in my personal life. My childhood home, my ex-girlfriend's apartment, the parking lot where I'd had my first kiss. Each location felt wrong when I returned to it, like someone had traced over reality with an unsteady hand. The breaking point came in October. We responded to a call. Elderly woman, difficulty breathing. Routine. But when we arrived at the address, I recognized it immediately. It was my apartment building, my floor, my unit number. The door was open. Inside, the layout was identical to my place, but everything was wrong. The furniture was from the 1950s, covered in dust. Family photos on the walls showed people I'd never seen, except one face kept appearing. A man in his late 40s, wearing a business suit. The same man from the SUV on Christmas Eve. In the last photo, He was standing in front of a house. The address was clearly visible on the mailbox. 1847 Warwick Street, the house that didn't exist anymore. And beside him, smiling, was someone else. It was me. But not me now. Me as I would look in 20 years. Older, grayer, wearing a paramedic's uniform with insignia I didn't recognize. My partner called out that she couldn't find any patient. The apartment was empty except for us. But I could hear breathing, slow, labored, coming from everywhere and nowhere. That sweet metallic smell was overwhelming now. We left without finding anyone. Dispatch had no record of the call. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I went back to the hospital and looked up the Christmas Eve patient. He'd been discharged after 3 days. Diagnosis, exposure and exhaustion. The address on file was 1847 Warwick Street, the address that didn't exist. I drove back to the cul-de-sac one more time. It was past midnight, the neighborhood asleep. The empty lot was still there, but now I could see more. Shadows that moved without sources, lights in windows that weren't there. And in the center of the lot, barely visible in the darkness, an SUV with its engine running. I approached slowly. The windows were fogged, but I could make out a figure in the driver's seat. I reached for the door handle, then stopped. The figure was wearing a paramedic's uniform. My badge number. The pager on my belt vibrated one last time. Complete the circuit. I understood then. The man in the SUV on Christmas Eve, he wasn't trying to hurt himself. He'd fired 6 shots at something, emptied his revolver at whatever was in that house that didn't exist anymore. And now somehow the timeline was folding in on itself, past and future colliding, creating these moments of intersection. I was him. Or I would be. Or I had been. Time doesn't work right in that cul-de-sac, doesn't follow the rules we trust. I backed away from the SUV, got in my car, drove home. But I know I'll go back. The pager tells me so. The coordinates it sends are getting more specific, the messages more urgent. Last night it displayed a date, December 24th. Christmas Eve is coming again. I've tried to change things, requested different shifts, different partners, but the schedule always shifts back. I'll be working that night. We'll respond to that call. We'll find myself in that SUV, or I already have, or I am right now, somewhere else, someone else. The empty lot on Warwick Street isn't empty. It's full of all the moments that were, that will be, that are happening simultaneously. The house is there and not there, burned and standing, future and past. And I'm caught in between, a paramedic responding to my own call for help, arriving both too late and too early, saving and failing to save myself in an endless loop that Christmas Eve created. My pager just vibrated again. New message. It's time. But I checked the date, and it's still October. Christmas Eve is still 2 months away. Or is it? The thing about time I'm learning is that it's just another vital sign. And mine's been irregular since that night, that morning, that moment that keeps happening. The sweet metallic smell is in my apartment now. The air is thick. And somewhere, in a cul-de-sac that exists and doesn't exist, an SUV is running, waiting for its driver, waiting for me. The revolver on my nightstand has 6 bullets. I don't remember buying it, but the receipt is in my wallet, dated tomorrow, or yesterday. The temporal distortion is getting worse. I know what happens next. I've already lived it, will live it, am living it now. The drive to Warwick Street. The house that isn't there suddenly is. The thing inside that shouldn't exist. The 6 shots that won't be enough. The note I'll write with charcoal from the burned foundation. Half an address, all I can manage before I become the call. Before I close the circuit. Before Christmas Eve repeats, and a younger version of myself breaks the passenger window to find me slumped over the wheel, holding half an address to a house that doesn't exist. The pager vibrates one final time. Welcome home. Outside my window, snow is falling. But it's October, it's April, it's Christmas Eve. It's always Christmas Eve on Warwick Street. Story 12. The Chains started their song 3 days ago, though I only understood what they meant when I found myself standing at the loading dock of the Suncrest Citrus Company, my hands already working the rusted latch before my mind caught up with my body. Central Florida has a way of hiding its dead industries behind curtains of kudzu and Spanish moss. But this packing plant wore its abandonment like a badge. Windows clouded with decades of grime, concrete walls stained with rust trails that looked like dried blood in the afternoon heat. I'd driven past it 100 times on State Road 50, always meaning to stop, always finding reasons not to. Today, the reasons ran out. The loading dock door gave way with a groan that seemed to echo from somewhere deeper than just rusted hinges. Inside, the air hung thick with the ghost of citrus. Not fresh, but fermented. Sweet sick like fruit left too long in the sun. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that shouldn't have been there. The roof was supposed to be intact, yet somehow daylight filtered through in patterns that made no architectural sense. The freight elevator squatted in the corner like a steel mouth, its gate half open, chains slack and pooling on the floor like entrails. The control panel was a museum piece, brass buttons green with verdigris, numbers barely visible beneath decades of grime. From somewhere in the shaft above, chains creaked in a rhythm that felt deliberate, measured, not wind, not settling, something with purpose. I pressed 2 without thinking, the button giving way with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting. The overhead light flickered once, twice, then darkness swallowed everything. The sensation wasn't like fainting. Fainting has a quality of dissolution, of coming apart at the edges. This was more like being folded into something else, pressed through a space too small for a human body, then reassembled on the other side. When consciousness returned, I was sitting on the elevator floor, my head pounding with a rhythm that matched the chains above. Slow, methodical pulses that seemed to count something I couldn't name. The elevator door stood partially open, revealing not the second floor I'd selected, but something else entirely. A narrow mezzanine stretched before me, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. The walls pressed close, painted that institutional green that belonged to another era, and the fluorescent lights hummed with electricity that shouldn't exist in a building abandoned for 30 years. But it was the crates that made my skin crawl. Wooden shipping crates lined both walls, stacked 3 high, each stamped with the Suncrest logo, a sun rising over orange groves that had been bulldozed for subdivisions in the 1990s. The stamps were fresh, ink still dark. The dates were from this month, this week, yesterday. The smell of burnt oranges grew stronger as I forced the elevator door wider and stepped onto the mezzanine. Not rotting oranges, burnt as if someone had tried to caramelize the fruit but left it too long over flame. It coated the back of my throat, made my eyes water. Beneath it lurked something else, something chemical and wrong, like pesticide mixed with copper. My phone showed no signal, but the clock still worked. 3:47 p.m. I reached into my pocket for my car keys and found something else. A weighing ticket, the kind they used to give truckers bringing in loads of fruit. The paper felt new between my fingers, crisp edges, fresh ink. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m., today's date. But at the bottom, where the shift supervisor would sign, someone had stamped "Night Shift Approved" in red ink that looked too wet, too fresh. Nobody had worked nights at Suncrest since 1987. I knew because I'd researched the place after driving past it so many times, found old newspaper articles about the closure, the labor disputes, the strange reports that preceded the final shutdown. Workers claiming to see people in the groves who weren't there. Fruit that weighed different amounts each time it was measured. Trucks arriving full and leaving empty with no record of unloading. The mezzanine stretched longer than should be possible given the building's footprint. I'd studied the structure from outside, maybe 200 feet long at most, but I'd been walking for what felt like 5 minutes, passing identical crates, identical sections of green wall, identical fluorescent fixtures that buzzed like angry wasps. The burnt orange smell grew stronger, mixing with something else now. Iron, maybe, or rust, or blood. A sound behind me made me turn. The elevator was gone. Not just closed, gone. Smooth green wall where the opening had been, as if it had never existed at all. My hand found the weighing ticket again, compulsively checking it was still there, still real. The timestamp had changed. 4:15 p.m. As I watched, the numbers shifted. 4:16. The crates were changing too. What had been fresh stamps were aging before my eyes, ink fading, wood darkening with moisture and rot. But underneath the decay, I could hear something moving inside them. Not quite scratching. More like shifting weight, like fruit rolling against wood. Except fruit doesn't breathe, doesn't whisper, doesn't know your name. I ran. The mezzanine had to end somewhere, had to lead somewhere. My footsteps echoed wrong, too many of them, as if I wasn't alone, as if something matched my pace just out of sync enough to create that doubled sound. The lights began to flicker, not all at once but in sequence, a wave of darkness chasing me down the corridor. Then I saw it. A door marked processing. The sign looked new, white letters on red background, the kind of OSHA-compliant signage that didn't exist when this plant was operational. Through the small window, I could see machinery, conveyor belts, sorting tables, all of it running, all of it processing fruit that glowed faintly in the fluorescent light, oranges that seemed to pulse with their own inner illumination. The door opened before I could touch it. Inside, the machinery ran with impossible silence. Conveyor belts moved, sorting arms swung, packing machines sealed boxes, but all of it happened without sound, like watching a film with the audio removed. The oranges moved through the system, but they were wrong. Too perfect, too uniform, their skins seeming to ripple with patterns that hurt to focus on directly. At the far end of the room stood a figure in a Suncrest uniform, back to me, operating a control panel that shouldn't exist. The uniform was period correct, 1950s style when the plant was at its peak, but the body wearing it was wrong. Too tall, joints that bent in too many places. When it turned its head, just its head, the body remaining perfectly still, I saw it had no face, just smooth skin where features should be, like an orange with its dimpled texture stretched over a skull. It raised one hand and pointed to a scale near the wall. An old Toledo scale, the kind with the sliding weights, the kind that needed manual calibration. On its platform sat a single orange, glowing with that same sick light. Above it, a sign, "Weigh in for night shift." The ticket in my pocket grew hot, burning through the fabric. I pulled it out to find the red stamp spreading like blood through water, consuming the paper, reaching for my fingers. I dropped it, but it hung in the air, unfolding into something larger, something that showed not just today's date but every date, all dates, a calendar that stretched backward and forward until time itself became meaningless. The faceless figure moved without walking, simply existing closer to me between one blink and the next. It gestured again at the scale. The orange pulsed brighter. From the machinery came a sound at last. Not mechanical noise, but voices. Hundreds of them, all counting in unison. Not numbers, weights, pounds and ounces of something that couldn't be measured in normal terms. I understood then. The plant had never really closed. It had just shifted, moved sideways into a space where the normal rules didn't apply. Where fruit could be weighed but never measured. Where night shift ran eternal, processing harvests that existed outside of time. Where workers without faces sorted produce that glowed with its own twisted light. The scale waited, the figure waited. The entire room held its breath, if rooms could breathe, if breath meant anything in a place like this. I backed toward where the door should be, but my hand found only smooth wall. The faceless figure tilted its head, an almost curious gesture, almost human, which made it infinitely worse. It reached up and began to peel away its smooth skin, revealing not a face but another layer of that same blankness, as if it could peel forever and find nothing but absence all the way down. The orange on the scale began to split, revealing not fruit, but something that pulsed with organic movement, something that had too many segments, too many chambers, like a heart made of citrus. beating with a rhythm that matched the chains I'd heard in the elevator shaft. The counting voices grew louder, and I realized they weren't counting at all. They were calling names. Every name. All names. Mine was in there somewhere, buried in the chorus, being weighed and measured and found to be exactly what they needed. The room began to fold in on itself, walls bending at angles that shouldn't exist, machinery continuing its silent operation even as space twisted around it. The faceless figure reached out with arms that kept extending, joints multiplying as needed, fingers that split into more fingers, all of them grasping for something I couldn't give them because I didn't know what it was. Then I was back in the elevator, gasping, the door sealed, my fingers still on the button marked 2, as if no time had passed at all. The chains above continued their slow, rhythmic creaking. My phone showed 3:47 p.m. In my pocket, the weighing ticket crinkled against my fingers, real as anything, impossible as everything. I jabbed at the 1 button, and this time the elevator moved, descending with grinding protest. The door opened onto the loading dock, exactly as I'd left it, dust motes still dancing in those impossible shafts of light. I ran for my car, not looking back, not stopping until I was miles away, parked at a gas station, hands shaking as I tried to process what had happened. The ticket was still in my pocket, still showing 3:47 p.m., still stamped for night shift. It's been 3 days now. 3 days of normal life, normal routine, normal everything except for the dreams where I'm back on that mezzanine, walking endless green corridors while crates breathe around me. 3 days of checking my pocket obsessively for a ticket that's always there, always showing the same time, always stamped in red that looks too fresh. 3 days of hearing chains in every quiet moment, counting something in pulses I'm beginning to understand. Tonight, I looked up the Suncrest Citrus Company's employee records from the 1950s. There's a name in the night shift roster that shouldn't be there, a name that was added yesterday, in handwriting that looks like mine, for a shift that starts at 3:47 p.m. and never ends. The chains are calling again, louder now, more insistent. They're not coming from memory or imagination. They're coming from outside my apartment window, from a freight elevator that shouldn't exist in a building that was never a packing plant. But the ticket in my pocket says otherwise. The stamp is spreading again, red ink like blood through water, and this time I don't think I can drop it. This time I think it's already too late. The weight has been measured. The shift has been approved. And somewhere in Central Florida, in a packing plant that's been closed for 30 years, the machinery runs silent and perfect, processing fruit that glows with its own light, waiting for workers who can peel away their faces and find nothing underneath but the obligation to clock in, to weigh the harvest, to feed the machines that never stop counting. I can smell burnt oranges again. Stronger now. The elevator is here. Story 13. And the cottonwood stood like a twisted sentinel in the motel courtyard, its leaves whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I'd driven 14 hours straight through the desert, my eyes burning from the endless ribbon of asphalt that cut through New Mexico's burnt ochre landscape. The Roadrunner Inn materialized from the heat shimmer like a mirage made concrete and neon, its sign flickering between full vacancy and no vacancy, unable to decide which lie to tell. My scalp still tingled from the fresh shave I'd gotten that morning in Amarillo. A desperate attempt to feel clean after 3 days on the road, running from something I couldn't name. The stubble was already beginning to push through, making my head feel like sandpaper when I rubbed it. That's how I first noticed the threads. I'd stepped outside for a cigarette, needing the nicotine to quiet the anxiety that had been building since I'd crossed the state line. The courtyard was a rectangle of cracked concrete surrounding a patch of dead grass and that solitary cottonwood. The tree looked wrong somehow, its branches reaching at angles that seemed to defy the logic of growth, as if each limb had been broken and reset by someone who'd never seen a tree before. The first thread touched my face like a lover's finger, so light I almost didn't notice. I brushed it away absently, thinking it was a spider's web. But then another fell, and another. Fine as baby hair, they drifted down in the windless evening, catching the sickly yellow light from the motel's exterior bulbs. Each time I swept them from my skin, I heard it. A giggle, sharp and brief, like a child trying not to be caught laughing in church. The sound didn't come from the highway, though Route 40 ran close enough that I could hear the semi-trucks groaning past. It seemed to emanate from the air itself, or perhaps from the threads as they fell. I looked up at the cottonwood's canopy, expecting to see a nest or some explanation, but the branches were bare of anything but leaves. More threads descended, covering my shoulders, my arms, tangling in what little stubble remained on my scalp. The sensation was maddening, like being touched by something that wasn't quite there. I stumbled back toward my room, number 27, brushing frantically at the invisible strands. Behind me, that tittering laugh followed, multiplying until it sounded like a classroom of hidden children sharing a terrible joke. The night passed in fits of scratching and false sleep. Every time I dozed, I felt the threads crawling across my skin, working their way into my ears, my nostrils. I'd jolt awake, gasping, finding nothing but the musty motel air and the drone of the ancient air conditioner. By dawn, my arms were covered in red welts from my fingernails. The motel manager was a sun-weathered man whose face looked like it had been carved from the same red rock that surrounded us. When I mentioned the threads and the cottonwood, he squinted at me with eyes that had seen too many travelers with too many stories. He assured me there were no spiderwebs in that tree. Never had been. They'd had it checked just last month when another guest complained. His tone suggested I wasn't the first to experience something, but also that he'd grown tired of hearing about it. He offered to move me to a different room, one facing the highway instead of the courtyard. I declined. Something about running felt like admitting defeat. That second night, I came prepared. I'd bought a powerful LED flashlight from a truck stop, the kind that could supposedly be seen from space. The courtyard was empty except for the moths circling the lights and the cottonwood standing guard. I clicked on the flashlight and aimed it upward. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing what the tree had hidden. The threads weren't coming from the branches at all. They descended from somewhere above the motel's flat roof, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. So fine they were nearly invisible except where the light caught them just right. They swayed in a breeze I couldn't feel, creating patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like cursive writing in a language I'd never learned. I followed one strand down with the light, watching it descend past the tree, past my eye level, until it terminated at something that made my stomach clench. A plastic key tag, the kind attached to motel room keys, dangled at the end like a fishing lure. The number on it was worn but readable, 15. Another thread nearby ended in a similar tag, 31, then 8, then 42. Dozens of them, all at different heights, all swaying with that imperceptible breeze. Some of the tags looked new, their red plastic still shiny. Others were sun-bleached and cracked, as if they'd been hanging there for years. The giggling started again, but this time I could tell it was coming from above, from wherever the threads originated. I swung the flashlight up, trying to penetrate the darkness beyond the roof, but the beam dissipated into nothing. The sound grew louder, not quite laughter anymore, but something hungrier, eager. A thread brushed my cheek, and I felt a sharp sting. When I touched the spot, my finger came away with a small drop of blood. The thread hadn't just touched me, it had cut me, precise as a razor. More began to fall, and I understood with a clarity that transcended logic. They were fishing. The tags were bait, and I was standing in the middle of their lines. I ran for my room, hearing the threads whistle through the air behind me, feeling them catch at my clothes, my skin. Inside, I slammed the door and drew the curtains, but I could still hear them outside, tapping against the window like fingernails. The giggling had become a chorus, harmonizing in frequencies that made my teeth ache. In the bathroom mirror, I saw my face was covered in hair-thin cuts, each one perfectly straight, as if drawn with a ruler and a scalpel. They formed a pattern I couldn't quite parse, something that looked almost like words if I squinted, but the meaning slipped away each time I tried to focus. I packed in the dark, throwing everything into my bag without folding, without care. The key to room 27 sat on the nightstand, its plastic tag bearing my room number in faded white text. I stared at it for a long moment, remembering all those tags hanging from the threads outside. How many guests had left their keys behind? How many had been caught? The manager's office was closed, but there was a night drop slot for keys. I shoved mine through, hearing it clatter into the box below. As I walked to my car, I kept the flashlight beam focused on the ground, refusing to look up, refusing to see what might be descending toward me. The parking lot was nearly empty, just my sedan and a few scattered trucks, belonging to long-haul drivers who'd stopped for the night. I threw my bag in the back and climbed behind the wheel, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The engine turned over on the third try, and I peeled out of the lot, gravel spinning beneath my tires. It wasn't until I was 5 miles down the highway that I allowed myself to look in the rearview mirror. The motel had already vanished into the pre-dawn darkness, swallowed by the desert. But something was moving in the mirror, swaying with the motion of the car. A plastic key tag dangled from my rearview mirror on a thread so fine it was nearly invisible. The number on it was 27. My room number, the one I'd just dropped in the night slot. I reached up to tear it down, but stopped. The thread led upward, through my roof, extending into the dark sky above. If I pulled it, what would I drag down into the car with me? What was on the other end, reeling in its line? The tag spun slowly, and I saw there was something written on the back, scratched into the plastic with something sharp. I adjusted the mirror to read it, though every instinct screamed at me to keep my eyes on the road. "You're still checked in." The giggling returned, not from outside but from inside the car, from the thread itself, vibrating with a laughter that seemed to come from very far away and very close at the same time. I could feel more threads falling now, inside the vehicle, brushing against the back of my neck, tangling in the stubble that had grown since yesterday's shave. I drove faster, pushing the speedometer past 90, past 100, but the threads kept coming. In the mirror, I could see them accumulating on the back seat, forming shapes that might have been letters, might have been faces, might have been nothing at all. The key tag swayed hypnotically, and I realized with a detached sort of horror that I was becoming drowsy, my eyelids growing heavy despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, and I wondered if I'd ever really left the motel at all, or if I was still there, tangled in those threads, being reeled up into whatever waited above the roof. The distinction seemed less important with each passing mile. Reality had become negotiable, a matter of perspective rather than fact. The sun rose eventually, painting the desert in shades of pink and gold. But the thread remained, the key tag still spinning its lazy circles. I'd driven 300 miles according to the odometer, but the landscape looked exactly the same as it had outside the Roadrunner Inn. The same red rocks, the same scattered brush, the same cottonwood trees, twisted and wrong, appearing at regular intervals along the roadside. I stopped at another motel that night, this one in Arizona, or so the signs claimed. The desk clerk handed me a key with a plastic tag. Room 27. I didn't bother to protest. The thread from my rearview mirror had grown thicker during the day, more visible, and I could see others now, hundreds of them, extending from my car into the sky like the strings of a marionette. That night, standing under another cottonwood in another courtyard, I felt the threads falling again. But this time, I didn't brush them away. I let them accumulate, layer upon layer, until I could barely see through the gossamer veil they created. The giggling had become a constant companion, a soundtrack to my new reality. I understood now that some guests never really check out. Their keys might go in the slot, their cars might leave the parking lot, but something essential remains, caught in those fishing lines that descend from somewhere above. We drive our routes, we stop at our motels, we smoke under our trees, but we're all still there at the Roadrunner Inn, suspended by threads too fine to see but too strong to break. The tag from room 27 still hangs from my mirror. Sometimes it shows my room number, sometimes it's blank, sometimes it displays numbers I don't recognize, rooms I haven't stayed in yet, or rooms I've forgotten I've already left. The thread connects me to all of them, to all the versions of myself scattered across the desert, each one caught in a slightly different stage of understanding. I've stopped trying to cut the thread. I've stopped wondering what's on the other end. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only experienced. One fiber at a time, one room at a time, one night at a time. The road continues, and I continue on it. My rearview mirror forever showing me where I've been and where I still am. The key tag spinning its eternal message. You're still checked in. You're always still checked in. Story 14. The coffee machine's fluorescent glare cut through the pre-dawn darkness, like a scalpel through flesh. My hands trembled slightly as I fumbled with the paper cup, whether from exhaustion or the 3 energy drinks I'd consumed since Atlanta, I couldn't tell. The rest stop sat like a concrete island in the Georgia wilderness, its parking lot nearly empty except for my sedan and a rust-eaten pickup truck that had been there when I arrived. I should have kept driving. The automatic doors had wheezed shut behind me with a pneumatic sigh, sealing me inside this fluorescent purgatory of vending machines and institutional tile. The place reeked of industrial disinfectant barely masking something else, something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in summer heat. I'd attributed it to the restrooms, tried not to think about it as the coffee machine gurgled and hissed. That's when I saw him. Not inside, outside, pressed against the automatic door's glass sensor panel. The clown mask was cheap latex, the kind you'd find at a dollar store, with exaggerated red lips frozen in a perpetual grin and hollow eye sockets that revealed nothing of what lurked beneath. But it was the suit that made my skin crawl. White fabric that might have been pristine once, now bearing the geography of countless stains. Rust-colored blotches, grass marks, something yellow and viscous near the collar. He didn't try to trigger the sensor, didn't wave his arms or step back to make the door open. He just stood there, mask pressed against the glass, breath fogging the surface in rhythmic clouds. The overhead lights made his presence feel like a photograph. Too still, too deliberate, like something staged for maximum effect. The coffee machine beeped. I grabbed my cup without looking away from the door, the scalding liquid sloshing over my fingers. The pain felt distant, secondary to the primal alarm spreading through my nervous system. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to get out, but getting out meant walking toward him. I chose the long route, circling through the aisles of travel brochures and overpriced snacks, keeping the door in my peripheral vision. He tracked my movement, mask sliding across the glass with a squeaking sound that made my teeth ache. When I finally reached the exit on the far side of the building, I half-jogged to my car, coffee abandoned on a concrete barrier. The parking lot stretched before me, bathed in the sickly amber of sodium lights. My car sat 50 feet away, might as well have been 50 miles. The morning air hung thick and humid, carrying the green smell of kudzu and decay from the surrounding forest. Insects hummed in the darkness beyond the light's reach, their drone mixing with the distant whisper of traffic on I-95. I made it halfway before I saw him again. He stood beside my driver's door, materialized from nowhere like a magic trick gone wrong. In his left hand, he held a balloon animal, a dog, I think, though the red latex had been twisted into something that looked more like roadkill than a pet. He didn't move as I approached, just stood there in that wrinkled suit, one hand on the balloon, the other hanging limp at his side. My keys bit into my palm as I gripped them, considering my options. The pickup truck was too far. Going back inside meant being trapped. I could hear my father's voice in my head, gruff and practical. Don't show fear. They feed on fear. I walked to my car with measured steps, each footfall deliberate on the asphalt. Up close, I could see more details I wished I couldn't. The mask's edges didn't quite meet his neck, revealing a strip of skin so pale it looked blue under the lights. His breathing was wrong, too slow, too deep, like someone practicing meditation or fighting off unconsciousness. Without acknowledging him, I unlocked the car. The electronic chirp felt obscenely loud in the silence. That's when he moved, raising the balloon dog and tapping it against my window. 3 times. Deliberate, methodical. The latex squeaked against the glass, leaving cloudy smears in its wake. Tap, tap, tap. I got in, locked the doors, started the engine. He stepped back just enough to let me reverse, never breaking that hollow-eyed stare. In my rearview mirror, I watched him stand in the empty parking space, balloon dog held high like a torch, until the darkness swallowed him whole. The interstate welcomed me back with the white noise of tires on asphalt. I cranked the air conditioning despite the morning chill, trying to clear the rest stop's stench from my nostrils. The radio offered nothing but static and distant gospel, so I drove in silence, watching the mile markers count up toward South Carolina. 20 miles later, an electronic highway sign blazed its warning in amber dots. Active search in area. Use caution. My hands tightened on the wheel. Police? Manhunt? The message offered no context, just that vague bureaucratic anxiety that could mean anything from an escaped prisoner to a missing hiker. The sun crept above the tree line, painting the interstate in shades of rust and gold. Traffic began to thicken. Commuters heading to Savannah, long-haul truckers pushing through their last hours of legally allowed drive time. Normal. Safe. The rest stop felt like a fever dream, something my exhausted mind had embellished beyond recognition. Then I saw the balloon. Red latex caught in a pine tree's skeletal fingers, 30 feet from the road. It bobbed in the morning breeze, too bright against the green, impossible to miss. My foot eased off the accelerator involuntarily. Could be coincidence. Had to be. Red balloons were common. Every child's birthday party, every car dealership promotion, another one. This time tied to a mile marker post. Then another wrapped around an exit sign. And another. A trail of red breadcrumbs leading north. Each one perfectly visible from the interstate. Each one impossible to be accidental. My speedometer crept toward 80, then 90. The engine whined in protest, but I couldn't make myself slow down. In the growing daylight, I finally noticed what he'd left on my window. 3 perfect circles where the balloon had touched, cloudy and opaque like cataracts on glass. I tried the windshield washer fluid at the next exit, pulled into a gas station and scrubbed with paper towels and window cleaner. The marks wouldn't budge. They weren't on the surface, but somehow in it. Like the glass itself had been changed at a molecular level. The attendant, a woman with kind eyes and a smoker's rasp, asked if I'd tried acetone. When I explained they'd appeared overnight, she stepped back, crossing herself. "You stop anywhere unusual?" Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I mentioned the rest stop. Her face went pale beneath her tan. She told me about the others. Travelers who'd stopped at that same rest area, always in the early morning hours, always alone. They'd report strange encounters, sometimes a clown, sometimes just a figure in white, always with balloons. The lucky ones drove away with nothing but stories. The unlucky ones. She gestured to my window. They get marked. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as rural superstition. But the marks stared back at me like dead eyes. She sold me a bottle of acetone, refused my money, told me to try it when I got somewhere safe, somewhere far from Georgia. The balloons followed me through South Carolina. Not constantly, but often enough to make my heart race each time a flash of red appeared in my peripheral vision. They showed up in impossible places, tied to overpasses too high to reach without equipment, floating in perfect formation above rest areas I didn't dare stop at, arranged in patterns that looked almost like letters when viewed from the right angle. I drove straight through to North Carolina, stopping only for gas and paying at the pump. The acetone did nothing to the marks. Neither did steel wool, razor blades, or the industrial-strength solvent a desperate hardware store employee suggested. The circles remained, and as the sun moved across the sky, I realized they were changing, growing more opaque during daylight, nearly transparent at night, like they were breathing with the rhythm of the day. The electronic signs kept appearing too. Different messages now. Vehicle matching description spotted. Remain vigilant. Report suspicious activity. I checked my phone at a red light, searching for news of whatever manhunt was underway. Nothing. The local news sites mentioned no searches, no warnings, no reason for the signs. That night, I stopped at a motel outside Raleigh, paid cash, parked where my car couldn't be seen from the road. The room smelled of cigarettes and resignation, but it had a deadbolt and a chain. I wedged a chair under the doorknob for good measure, then sat on the bed, staring at my reflection in the dark television screen. The marks were visible even in the dim light. 3 perfect circles that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. I touched one gently, expecting to feel a difference in texture. The glass was smooth, normal, but my finger came away with a slight tackiness, like touching something coated in sugar water. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every sound in the motel became footsteps, every shadow under the door, a presence waiting to enter. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft squeaking sound, rhythmic and deliberate, latex on glass. I crept to the window, peered through a gap in the curtains. The parking lot was empty except for my car and a few others belonging to travelers as desperate as myself. But on my windshield, illuminated by the motel's neon sign, sat a new balloon animal. A giraffe this time, its long neck twisted into an impossible spiral, pinned beneath my wiper blade like a parking ticket. I didn't go outside, didn't check out. When the sun rose, I simply left, abandoning the room key and driving north with the balloon animal still on my windshield, too afraid to touch it, too afraid to stop. It finally blew away somewhere in Virginia, leaving another mark where it had rested, a long, serpentine smear that hurt to look at directly. The calls started that afternoon. My phone would ring, showing numbers I didn't recognize, area codes from Georgia, then South Carolina, then wherever I happened to be. I never answered. The voicemails were just breathing, slow and deliberate, occasionally punctuated by the squeak of latex being twisted into shapes. I've been driving for 3 days now. The marks have spread. Not physically, but in how I perceive them. Sometimes I see faces in their cloudy surfaces. Sometimes they seem to form words I can't quite read. The balloons keep appearing, getting more elaborate, more impossible. This morning, I saw an entire parade of them floating against the wind, moving in perfect formation along the highway's shoulder. The electronic signs have stopped mentioning searches. Now they just show coordinates, latitude and longitude that, when I finally worked up the courage to check, lead back to that rest stop in Georgia. Always back to that rest stop. I've started to understand something, though I wish I hadn't. The man in the clown mask wasn't hunting me, wasn't following me. He was marking me, yes, but not for himself. The marks are an invitation, a beacon, a way of saying this one saw something they shouldn't have. Because I've seen others now. Cars with the same cloudy marks on their windows, drivers with the same hollow-eyed exhaustion, all of us moving along the interstate system like blood cells in America's circulatory system, carrying something we don't understand to destinations we'll never reach. Last night at a truck stop in Pennsylvania, I met another marked one, an older man, professional, the kind who'd normally never acknowledge a stranger. But he saw my windows, I saw his, and we shared a moment of terrible understanding. He'd been marked for 2 years. 2 years of driving, of balloons, of signs that made no sense. He showed me his logbook, pages and pages of dates, locations, patterns he'd tried to discern. He asked me if I'd figured it out yet, what we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to go. I told him about the coordinates, how they all led back to Georgia. He laughed, bitter and broken, said he'd been back 3 times. The rest stop was just a rest stop during the day. Normal, mundane. Even at night, usually empty. Except for 13 nights a year, seemingly random, when the marked ones feel a pull they can't resist. When they drive through the night to arrive at that rest stop just before dawn. When they park and wait, watching the automatic doors, waiting for something they can't name. He'd resisted twice. The 3rd time, he couldn't help himself. He went inside. The rest stop was full of people, he said. All marked, all waiting. And in the center, twisting balloons with impossible speed and precision, was not the clown but something wearing the idea of a clown. using it like a costume that didn't quite fit reality. It handed out balloon animals to everyone, specific shapes for specific people, and when they took them, he stopped talking then, stared at his coffee with eyes that had seen too much. When I pressed him, he just shook his head, paid his bill, left. I watched him drive away, noticed his back window had new marks, dozens of overlapping circles forming a pattern that made my eyes water. I'm writing this from a motel in Ohio. It's 2 a.m., and I can hear squeaking outside my door. Not latex this time, wheels. A cleaning cart maybe, or something pretending to be a cleaning cart. The marks on my window have started to move when I'm not looking directly at them, repositioning themselves into configurations that suggest meaning without providing it. Tomorrow, I'll keep driving. North, maybe, or west. Direction doesn't matter anymore. The interstate system is a closed loop, every exit leading eventually back to every other exit. The marked ones understand this. We're not running from something. We're circulating through something, part of a pattern too large to see from our position within it. But I know what I won't do. I won't go back to Georgia. I won't answer the pull when it comes, and it will come. The man who marked me, who wasn't really a man, he's patient. The kind of patient that comes from existing outside our understanding of time. The balloons will keep appearing, the signs will keep pointing the way, and eventually, every marked one returns. The squeaking has stopped. There's a shadow under my door that wasn't there before, wrong-shaped and too still. It's holding something, I think. Something round, something red. I should probably run. Pack my things, get to my car, drive until the sun comes up. But I'm tired. So tired. And the marks on my window are glowing now, faintly, spelling out something that might be words or might be madness. They say, "You're almost ready." Ready for what, I don't know. Don't want to know. But I can feel it building. The pull southward. The gravity of that rest stop in Georgia. The promise of answers to questions I never wanted to ask. The shadow under my door is moving now, sliding, like something being pushed through the gap. It's a balloon animal. A dog, like the first one. But this one is breathing. Story 15. The sodium lights cast everything in that sick amber glow that makes you forget what real colors look like. I'd been cycling this route under the Port Newark overpass for 3 years, always after the 11 p.m. shift, and I'd memorized every pothole, every shadow cast by the container stacks. That's how I knew something was wrong when the white van first appeared. It crawled alongside me like a predator testing its prey, matching my pedaling speed perfectly. No company logos, no plates I could make out in the dark. The side door hung open just enough to show darkness inside, sliding on its track with each bump in the road. The driver's voice came soft through the gap between windshield and door frame, asking if I needed a ride to the gate. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of shoulders hunched over the wheel. The door slid wider. Inside, where passenger seats should have been, I glimpsed what looked like a mechanic's creeper, one of those wheeled platforms you slide under cars with, secured by ratchet straps. Nothing else. No tools, no equipment that would justify a maintenance van being out here at this hour. Just that creeper, waiting. I stood on the pedals and pumped harder, following the designated bike lane between the warehouses. The van's engine faded behind me. But at every cross street between the storage lots, I'd catch it again in my peripheral vision, headlights off, coasting through the intersections like it knew exactly where I'd emerge. The 24-hour self-storage facility had become my halfway sanctuary over the years. I kept tools there, spare parts for the bike, things I didn't want to haul home to my apartment. The fluorescent overheads buzzed as I punched in my PIN, and the gate rolled open with its familiar grinding complaint. I wheeled inside quickly, hearing the van's engine growl somewhere beyond the fence. The storage corridor stretched out in perfect rows, brass-colored roll-up doors reflecting the overhead lights like a hall of mirrors. Unit after unit, all identical, all silent. My box was deep in the maze, 3F47, and I'd chosen it specifically because you had to make 4 turns to reach it from the entrance. The van's engine cut off. In the sudden quiet, I could hear my own breathing, The tick of my bike chain cooling, the distant hum of the industrial air system. Then something else. Wheels rolling on concrete. Not footsteps. Wheels. Slow and deliberate, like someone pushing a cart through a library. I stood frozen at my unit, key half turned in the padlock. The rolling sound came closer, pausing at each intersection of corridors as if checking directions. Through the gaps where the roll-up doors didn't quite meet the floor, I could track its progress by the shadows it cast, something low to the ground, wider than a person walking. The sound stopped directly outside my unit. Holding my breath, I crouched and peered through the inch-high gap at the bottom of the door. 2 pairs of tennis shoes, pristine white, positioned oddly far apart. Between them, the edge of what looked like that same wheeled platform from the van. The feet weren't walking. They were planted on the creeper while someone else pushed from behind, someone I couldn't see. My phone vibrated in my pocket, the sound impossibly loud in the silence. An AirTag notification. An unknown accessory has been moving with you. With trembling fingers, I ran my hand under the bike seat and found it. A tracker wrapped in electrical tape, stuck there with the kind of precision that suggested practice. I peeled it off, the adhesive making a sound like tearing skin. The feet outside shifted slightly. I had to make a choice. The wheeled platform began moving again, continuing down the corridor with that same deliberate pace. I waited until the sound faded, then carefully opened my unit just enough to slip out. 3 units down was 3F50, which I knew had been vacant for months. I pressed the tracker against its doorframe and ran. The next few days I changed my route, took different streets, left at different times. But the feeling of being watched never left. Every white vehicle made my hands tighten on the handlebars. Every shadow in my peripheral vision could have been that van, waiting. Thursday evening, stepping out of the gym near my apartment, I saw it parked across the street. Same van, or identical to it. The side door was closed this time, but through the windshield, I could make out the silhouette of that creeper, standing upright against the back wall like a stretcher. That's when I noticed the sticker on my bike frame, a yellow inventory tag identical to the ones used at the storage facility, with a barcode and unit number I'd never seen before, 7X13. My facility only went up to level 5. There was no level 7, but I had to check. Had to know. That night, I returned to the storage facility. The security guard barely looked up from his phone as I badged in. I pulled up the facility app, typed in 7X13. The screen flickered, then displayed. Unit not found in current map configuration. Current map configuration. As if there were other configurations, other maps. I started exploring sections of the facility I'd never visited. Past level 5, the numbering system broke down. Units had designations that didn't follow any pattern. 9B, 401, 2Z7, M4 null. The lighting was different here too. Older fluorescents that hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. Then I found it. Not 7X13, but something else. A unit with its door partially raised, just 6 inches off the ground. Beneath it, tire marks from a creeper, fresh scratches on the concrete where someone had been sliding in and out. The padlock hung open. Inside, the walls were covered with surveillance photos. Hundreds of them, all taken from low angles as if the photographer had been lying on the ground, or on a wheeled platform. Cyclists, all of them. Different faces, different bikes, but all captured on the same routes around the port. All wearing the same confused, frightened expression I'd probably worn that first night. Each photo had an inventory sticker. Each sticker had a unit number. I found myself in the collection. Multiple shots from different nights, some I remembered, some I didn't. My sticker read 7X13, just like on my bike. But there was another detail that made my stomach turn to ice water. In the corner of each photo, just visible, was a date stamp. My photos were dated 3 weeks into the future. The rolling sound started again, distant but approaching. Multiple sources this time, converging from different corridors. I ran. abandoning my bike, sprinting through the maze of units. Behind me, the rolling grew louder, accompanied now by something else. A sound like breathing, but wrong, like air being forced through tubes. I made it to the exit, burst through the security office. The guard looked up, startled, but his eyes focused on something behind me. His expression didn't change to concern or alarm. He simply nodded, as if confirming something, and returned to his phone. Outside, 3 white vans idled in the parking lot, side doors open, creepers visible inside each one. I walked home. It took 2 hours. Every few blocks, I'd hear wheels rolling on sidewalk behind me, maintaining the same distance no matter how fast or slow I walked. When I finally reached my apartment, I found another inventory sticker on my door. The unit number was different this time, sub 1A. I looked it up on the app. This time it showed a location, not in the storage facility but beneath it, a basement level that shouldn't exist, that wasn't on any architectural plans I could find online. The unit was marked as occupied, in transit. That was a week ago. The vans don't follow me anymore. They don't need to. Every morning I find new inventory stickers on my coffee mug, my bathroom mirror, my work locker. Each one shows a different unit number, and when I check them on the app, they're all marked the same way. Occupied, in transit. Last night, I felt it for the first time. Lying in bed, that sensation of wheels beneath me, rolling slowly through dark corridors. The ceiling of my bedroom seemed lower, the walls closer, like the inside of a storage unit. When I turned on the lights, everything snapped back to normal. But the feeling persists, that I'm not in my apartment anymore, that I'm in transit, stored somewhere between waking and sleeping, between one map configuration and another. This morning, I found a new sticker on my skin, right on my forehead, when I looked in the mirror. The unit number keeps changing every time I look away and back. Sub 1A, then 7x13, then sequences of numbers that hurt to read, that seem to extend beyond the edges of the sticker itself. I've stopped checking the app. I know what it will say. The worst part isn't the vans, or the creepers, or even the photos dated in the future. It's the growing certainty that I've been in storage all along, that what I thought was my life is just the dream of something lying on a wheeled platform, being moved through endless corridors by hands I'll never see, to a destination marked only by an inventory sticker that no map will ever show. Sometimes late at night, I can hear other stored things nearby. They sound like people, but their voices come from too low to the ground, and when they move, it's always on wheels. We're all in transit, all occupied, all waiting to arrive at units that exist outside of current map configurations. I still go to work, still ride my bike. But now I know these are just the movements allowed within my storage space, the small freedoms granted to items in long-term inventory. The white vans are gone because they've completed their delivery. I am the delivery. And somewhere, in a unit that doesn't exist on any map you could access, someone is checking my inventory sticker, confirming I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, stored, cataloged, and rolling through the dark on wheels that never stop turning.